All right, everybody, it is 5 o'clock, so we'll get this meeting started. So welcome everybody to the January 19th Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting. This meeting is being held entirely remotely with participants participating via Zoom app. The public can participate via YouTube, and there's directions on the town's website detailing how you can join. I ask that, anybody on the call, please make sure your device is muted if you're not speaking so that you're not distracting or picked up by the audio. I also ask if you wish to speak that you wait to be recognized. Please raise your hand either virtually or in your camera window, and I will call on you. If you represent a project or if you are in a butter, please state that representation or your address so that we can record that properly. And with that, we will begin tonight's meeting with public comment on items that are not being heard this evening. Not seeing any action on Zoom at this point. I'll give it another quick check, but I'll go through this evening's continuances. So under notices of intent, we have 78 Wauwinet Road LLC at 78 Wauwinet Road, continued until February 2nd. That looks to be our only continuance this evening. Public comment. With that, without public comment, we will begin under notices of intent. We have Easton Street LLC at 55 Easton Street, represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. I maybe joined a little bit late, but is Mike joining us or is he out this evening?
He's going to be out this evening.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental Consultants. And Will, if possible, can I share my screen?
I'm sorry, do you have to request that through me or do I share it with you?
I can, let me see if it works. Everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
All right, excellent. Well, we submitted revised plans based on the input we received back at the last meeting on December 22nd, I believe. Just to reiterate, the entire site is located within flood zone elevation 7, and then there's an isolated vegetated wetland further to the north that is separated from the project site by an existing structure on a neighboring abutting parcel and a stone patio area and a stockade fence surrounding that structure. For the GIS, here's the lot in question, and here's the wetland that's surrounded by development, just for reference purposes. So at the last meeting, we had a proposal that resulted in reduction of structural footprint in the 50-foot buffer zone to that isolated vegetated wetland by 49 square feet. We made some revisions to by shifting the structure closer towards Easton Street, so to the south, and to the east, further away from that isolated vegetated wetland. And what I have on this plan right here, highlighted in red or crosshatched in red, is the proposed structural reduction that is occurring within the 50-foot buffer zone. So cumulatively, the revised application results in a net reduction of 114 square feet of structural footprint in the 50-foot buffer zone over existing conditions. This back portion of the structure is currently on slab, and as stated at prior meetings, we are proposing to elevate the entire structure, elevate it 2.5 feet, and putting on it a crawl space foundation with flood vents in compliance with state and building code requirements which will also enhance flood zone interests, which will result in a significant improvement over existing conditions. But again, we have the summary of areas right here of what's existing and proposed within the 50-foot with that 114 square foot reduction within the 50-foot. And the structure is moving further away from that isolated wetland. And we believe, based on the reconstruction of the flood zone compliant foundation, the reduction in the structural footprint, and increasing the wetland structural setbacks, that there will be a significant net improvement to existing conditions. And while this wasn't included at the in the recent submission, post submission, we've had some internal conversations and are willing to provide some additional revegetation areas. I'm just going to fill in right here in front of you. So the applicant is also willing to provide a 3-foot vegetated strip along the back portion of the property that will be proposed to be planted with native shrubs, primarily consisting of sweet pepper bush, arrowwood, or high bush blueberry, to revegetate portions of the existing lawn area. So cumulatively, that results in about 217 square feet of lawn reduction with the revegetation effort, coupled with the structural reduction and improvement to the site conditions. And with that, I just also wanted to note that I'm also joined by Ryan Maxwell from Bracken Engineering and Sarah Alger. And Sarah, I don't know if you had anything more to add at this point before we turn over to questions.
I think you've pretty much covered it, Brian. Just looking at this, it seems pretty clear that although the waiver's discretionary, we fall pretty squarely within the net benefit reduction of any adverse impacts. It's hard to imagine how what we're doing could have any adverse impacts to that isolated wetland, given the fact that it's sheltered from us by a garage, I guess it's a guest house structure and a stockade fence. Plus, we're getting rid of the slab on grade foundation there in the back and raising not just the section of the house that's within the 50, but the entire house, reducing what's within the 50 by 114 square feet. That's a 38% reduction. I think it's pretty clearly going to be a much better situation for stormwater, dealing with the water on site, and also protecting that wetland from any adverse impacts from our project.
Do you want me to stop the share right now?
Yes, if you guys are done presenting, yes. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from commissioners? And we did go out and do a site visit it was Tuesday this week.
Okay.
Yeah, so I believe it was Ian, Joe, myself, and Mark. Again, any questions or comments from commissioners?
I was there too.
Yes.
Did I not say Seth? I thought I said Seth. And I definitely said Ian, so maybe that didn't come through.
That's all right.
I definitely said that.
I just, so Sarah, here we're having dueling bookcases, and I have to admit that I agree with your assessment. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there. And Brian, thank you
like
for
your
all the
book
work you did on it.
Better than I like your bookcases better than mine. We'll have to confer.
Well, that's very kind of you, but you can't actually read the titles from, I don't think so.
All right, so if there are no other questions or comments, Mark.
Thank you, Ashley. Brian, what is your plan for the actual raising of the house on the primarily in the 50-foot barrier? Will you be keeping the same foundation or creating a new one?
Improving the foundation. So that red cross hatched area is being removed. That's a portion of the area that's on slab. There's a garage out back. We are proposing to elevate. The new foundation will be a crawl space foundation with flood vents to allow floodwaters to freely pass through. That will be an improvement over existing conditions. Whereas right now, it's not enabling floodwaters to pass through or absorb naturally.
Follow up, please, Ashley.
Yep.
I'm more concerned with excavation in that zone. So if you'll be just adding to the top of the foundation, but not excavating anything new in there.
I think that may be a little TBD based on the condition of the foundation. Certainly if it's structurally sound, when they'll just be building up, there may be a need for some shallow excavation. Certainly the slab itself is going to be removed, but this is not going to be deep footings, like into the groundwater. It will be all elevation above. Again, we're raising it up 2.5 feet.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? If not, we'll open it up for public comment on 55 Easton Street. I do not currently see any public comment. Will, do we have everything we would need to close?
Yes, we do.
Brian, would you like to close?
Yes, I believe so. Thanks.
Is there a motion to close?
So moved, Madam Chair.
So motion made by Linda, seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And that moves us on to Hang 10 LLC at 21 Meter Street. And we have Art Gasparo on to represent this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with a continued public hearing for the project at 21 Meter Street. We have filed supplemental and revised information based on the comments that were received at the first hearing, which I would like to just take a few minutes to go through. To briefly refresh your memory on this, this is the project on a vacant lot within land subject to coastal storm flowage. And there has been some concerns raised as to whether or not there were other resource areas, which we have filed additional information to support that finding that there in fact was not. There is your first hearing, there was discussion about the timber perimeter that surrounded the property and how that might interfere with the performance standards related to land subject to coastal storm flowage. And what we did was take off the top row of that timber wall such that the grade is now, the timbers are no higher than the surrounding grade. So it's not really a wall, it's sort of a subsurface perimeter. The hope and idea had been that overland flow from abutting properties was flooding this property, and he was hoping to stop their water from flooding onto the property. But given the comments at the commission hearing, he removed that top row. The remainder of and the project again is just to restore the site and cover it with grass seed, and then to have a small parking area that comes in from the road as shown on the plan, and a picket fence along the two sides and a board fence along the backside. There was questions related to whether or not an IVW existed on the site. We had provided an abundance of information with our original filing, which we've provided even more information on the in the supplemental response that you have that supports that position based on the studies that our wetland scientists did, including borings on the site, looking at the both the hydrology and the soil conditions to come to the conclusion that in fact there was not a jurisdictional isolated vegetated wetland resource area on the site. I know that you had a site visit to the property, and again, just reminding the commission some of that supporting information related to orders of conditions and certificates of compliance that were issued for the immediately adjacent properties, the surrounding areas that you saw in your site visit that are, essentially lawn and landscaped areas. There's no, evidence of vegetated wetlands surrounding the area that was claimed to be perhaps a resource area, which we do not believe that it was. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or outstanding concerns that you may have with the application. Again, it's we see it as a notice of intent for work within land subject to coastal storm flowage so that we can restore the site, which we fully understand and believe the project completely complies with those performance standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Any questions or comments from commissioners? I guess I have one question, Art, and then I just saw your hand go up, Seth. Did you guys go out and already remove the timbers?
He did, just the top row.
Okay.
So I had it on the plan, and when I told the applicant about that's what we were going to do, he said, well, I'll just make them not have to worry about it. So he just unscrewed them. So they're gone.
Okay.
And they were gone at the site visit so that everybody could see that the water was flowing. And that was 2 weeks ago.
Okay, I did my site visit a little bit maybe ahead of the rest of the group, and then we went back again. But I guess I'm just concerned about any manipulation to the site before we have proper permit.
I understand, but if it helps, and to be clear, they were it was no other real manipulation other than they were timber locked down. And so he just screwed in and lifted them off. No machinery, nothing else. Just to, again, he wanted the commission to, have no sort of concern related to the land subject to coastal storm flowage, and didn't do any other, didn't do any sawing, cutting, nothing. It's just unscrewed.
Okay. Just trying to think when I definitely saw the site, I think before he maybe unscrewed it. But Seth, I saw your hand up, and then Linda, I'll go to you, and Joe, I saw yours pop up as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions that hopefully aren't too random, but the first is, so in the letter from Northeastern Consulting Forestry Services,
Yes.
there is 2 test pits referenced,
Mhm.
and the test pits, it says, showed free water at 26 and 25 inches respectively.
Mm-hmm.
Is that characteristic of what the depth to high groundwater is, or is that just what the test pit showed on that site in any given day?
We have Mr. Garneau with us, and so through the chair, if I may defer to Mr. Garneau.
Yep, go ahead.
Good evening to the board. Kevin Garneau with Northeastern Consultant Forestry Services. Based on the 2 test pits in the free water, we did not find modeling that would have made a higher groundwater table, which is evident in some soils.
So if I may summarize then to directly answer Mr. Engelborg's question, then yes, the groundwater is the best evidence of estimated seasonal high groundwater.
Thank you. I'm just trying to make sure that we are all clear about what the definitions of an isolated vegetated wetland are. So it's not really covered too much in the Wetlands Protection Act, but it's referenced more in the Nantucket local regulations. There's been this discussion of as soils, wetlands, or soils, vegetation, and hydrology. That's obviously relevant. Hydrology is not important at this site. Vegetation is important at this site. But soils, there's this reference that a few people have made over time that you can't have a wetland without hydric soils. And that actually, according to our regulations, is not true. If there's water within 18 inches of the surface, you could have an isolated vegetated wetland. But as from what has been said in this conversation so far, it looks like there was no water found within 18 inches of surface.
Thank you, Seth. Linda?
I learn something new every day from you, Seth. Just to get it clear in my head. You didn't find that this was an active wetland. Storm flowage, because I've seen the water go all the way up to Union Street. Our family has a house on Union Street down the street from this. Whatever structure goes on here is going to be on helical piers. I was concerned, like Ashley, about any change in the grade to force water onto Diane Coombs' lot or the one on Fayette, because I used to live right behind this on Fayette, or any of the other structures around it. You're not going to change the way the water goes now. It's very wet in her backyard. It's very wet in the other guy's backyard. It's very wet in the one right next to you that fronts on Union Street. I know how wet it is because I did the project for Kim on Washington Street. So whatever you're going to do to this lot is not going to change the grade to force the water onto anybody else or change the way the water flows, because you're going to be on piers, which means there's no mass on the ground other than what you set in for the piers. So the water isn't going to move any differently.
They're also, Linda, they're not proposing any structures at this point.
Oh, I know, but it's coming.
But
So
yeah,
I just want to make sure.
for this notice, though, we can't talk about
Go
structures
there.
that aren't actually proposed.
There yet, but we're not doing anything that's going to change the way the water goes now or change that grade.
Confirm.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I would say exactly. We understand the requirements for the performance standards for land subject to coastal storm flowage, and that would be a restoration of the pre-existing grade.
Thank you.
Nothing you're going to do to it in the meantime is going to change that at the moment.
And I don't believe we could in the future obtain a permit from this commission and meet the performance standards for no fill within land subject to coastal storm flowage.
Okay, because I know how it moves around through that whole block. It's insane.
Thank you, Linda. Joe, your hand had been up, and then Seth, I see yours going back up.
Yes, I raised my hand because I was going to confirm that the top layer was removed during the site visit that I was on. Thank you.
Thank you. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I never really finished my point, but just getting back to whether IVW exists on the site or not. It's possible that at one point there was an IVW, especially given the vegetation there, especially jewelweed is, I think, a wetland obligate species, and cattails are very dependent on wet areas as well. It's hard to know for sure, though, because at the time when some preliminary investigation happened prior to this notice, we unfortunately don't have complete information documenting anything like depth of high groundwater or soils. So unfortunately, this might be a case for us needing to do better reconnaissance on some sites in the future, but we do have to follow our regulations with what the language in the regulations say. We can't just suspect that there was a wetland there if we don't have the two pieces of information we need. We do need both the soils information and the vegetation information. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? If not, we'll open it up for public comment. And Diane Coombs, I do see your hand up. And I should, Diane, if you're trying to speak, you're muted, but I also do want to remind the public to try and not be repetitive to what we already have in the record.
I'll try very hard. If I start to go, because I feel strongly about this, just tell me to go on. I have lived here for 50 years, every day, 50
Diane,
years.
can you just restate your address for us?
Oh, is 44 Union Street. And down at the corner where you saw the site plan, you will see the fence that goes down at 46 Union, and it comes to this property, and my fence is the one going would be going north from there. I'm sorry. What I am concerned about is there is wetlands here. I haven't given the soil a view and knowledge, but I can tell you that many times in a particularly wet spring, like last spring or whatever, that the water comes up to 12 inches below the top of the soil. I have dug that. I have a large 150-year-old elm tree in that particular corner, and we have managed to keep it alive by watching it carefully about any flow of water, and not raising the earth, because I don't want to do that. I have got the vegetation that goes along is willows, Japanese dappled willows. I have lost many things that don't like, large trees don't like water, and I had 3 of them and they are gone. I watched this spring and I really didn't know what's happening. I cannot walk, unfortunately, and my view is right out my window, which is south, looks right onto that property. I saw the bucket truck come down and dig out the stuff, and the water poured out. It looked like he was digging in the harbor. I really didn't know what was going on, and it went on and on and on. He took it out. All the Joe Pye weed and all that stuff was taken out and removed, and those wooden sidings were put in. If I want to just have you consider, maybe David Haynes would know, you've taken the top off, which is fine, but what are you doing to the natural drain of water by having them sunk in below? This is one of our main problems, which set this whole thing up, is because houses around have raised their properties, not particularly with Concom's certification, but 2 feet over the house next to mine, and it stops the natural flow. It isn't just rainwater coming down from Orange Street, it's underground water. I have 6 springs in the basement of my house.
So,
We can
Mrs. Coombs, so your main concern still then is the boards that are around that property stopping water flow, even the lower one. I just want to make sure we're clear.
Yes, that's one of the things. And the other thing is, you really got to look at this. This is not something that really needs to be observed for a day. This is a wetland. It may not be a big wetland, it may not be, but it is never dry. Never dry. And you put a house in there and you are going to stop the flow, which is going to react to 4 other properties. and going to kill everything around it. They cannot absorb the water.
So, Mrs. Coombs, thank you for your comment. They, again, currently are not proposing a house in front of the Concom, so we do need to kind of move that out of our heads. It might come in the future, but it's not before us tonight. But we will certainly continue to discuss the flow of water and anything that might impede the flow and impact your property or surrounding lots. Stephen Cohen, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize, I'm on the ferry if there's background noise, but hopefully you can hear me. So I represent the Kims at 46 Union, which is the property directly behind this. And I'll try not to repeat information that's already been submitted in the letter from David Haynes, which was submitted on behalf of my client. But I think the commission is effectively aware that this property has a long-term understanding that there was a wetland there, and there's photographic evidence and testimony of wetland species and observation of wetland soils in that area. And what sort of shocks me is that this applicant knew that there was potentially a wetland there. It was listed in the real estate listing that there was a wetland and that they should get Concom approval. I'm sorry about that background noise. Sorry, but the applicant instead just came in and scooped everything out, scooped out all the vegetation, scooped out all the soils, and built a wall around it, which interrupted the flow of water and interrupted the grading. And I think what the commission, and the problem here is not what's being proposed. The problem here is that the applicant is attempting to establish that there is no wetland when they're the ones who removed it or removed the ability to determine what was there. So I think what the commission should do is first require that all of the timbers be removed because they're interrupting the flow of water. The second thing that the commission should do is require that the wetland species that are identified in the photographs should be replanted approximately in the volume and location that they are in the photographs, and then should require that the lot be allowed to rest and that no determination be made as to whether or not that's a wetland until the revegetated and repaired area is allowed to heal itself. And so, it's not really just about whether or not there's a driveway and a parked car here. It's about whether or not there's the ability to have restricted or unrestricted or conditioned or unconditioned use of this lot in the future based on what we think was a wetland that was unceremoniously removed without permission. So that's the recommendation for my clients, that the wetland species should be restored and there should be no finding of that there is no wetlands and there should be nothing done there. Now, if the applicant is able to get waivers from the commission and is able to develop the lot, that's fine. My clients are not trying to have the lot not have the ability to be developed in the way it appropriately would be. They're just trying to have the applicant not rewarded for coming in with a backhoe and ripping everything out. So hopefully you heard my presentation and I'll rest at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Seth, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And feel free to correct me if I have the timeline wrong, but so there was unpermitted work, then there was an enforcement process that we pursued that I think culminated. Is that correct?
I don't remember how deep we went into the enforcement on this property, quite honestly. But
Okay.
yes, it was flagged for enforcement.
And then there was a notice of intent that was submitted before the commission turnover that was ultimately withdrawn.
Yes.
And then there was this new notice of intent that we're talking about now. So my point is that some of these issues, unfortunately, are outside the scope of the notice of intent. They should have been handled in the enforcement process. Actually, probably need to be handled in the enforcement process. And we may have missed the mark with this enforcement. We may not have done a good enough job at identifying all the resources on site. And if that is the case, I think that that's pretty sad in my opinion. And we need to do better in the future. But you can't require restoration of unpermitted activities in a notice of intent, I think. Maybe you can, but I don't think that's how the process goes. I think the process for unpermitted work goes through enforcement that sometimes leads to a new notice under the understanding that, you know, it's based off the enforcement. But I honestly think these processes are separate. I will just say too, and I'm not trying to represent or speak for the client, but the client has fully admitted that there are wetlands on site. If you look at the notice of intent application, you know, they submitted an application for work in land subject to coastal storm flowage, one of the wetland protected resource areas that's, you know, relevant to our bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act. I don't think that anybody thinks that there are no wetland resource areas. I think that some people disagree about which resource areas are there. But this whole bit about, it said, you know, Concom filing required in the real estate listing. It's because it is required, and then they're here doing that filing. So I think that point is not particularly relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Although I agree with much of what you've said. You know, when I looked at this and was reading kind of the back and forth wetland specialists, you know, on some properties, if we do need like mitigation, let's say, we would ask that they mitigate with plantings. So it did cross my mind when I looked at this to say, hey, maybe it shouldn't be a full lawn. Maybe we need to mitigate potentially what happened here with plantings. But I do can understand that we don't have the full set of information in order to do that. And we can't go back in time getting soil data, unfortunately. So that, you know.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and sorry to interrupt, but just before I lose my train of thought, do we have any staff level soil data or any independent soil data that was collected apart from the Hands report? If so, it'd be great to see. Just checking. Thank you.
Thank you. Will, do you have that information at hand, or is that something we need to look into?
Yeah, not that I know of at all. But I think it would be wise to ask Jeff about it. He's going to be gone until Monday, but you can make note.
Thank you. David, I see your hand.
Yes, please. I'd like to address the commission on this issue. And again, I apologize for the lateness of the letter that I submitted the last time. I didn't get the phone call until Tuesday night to get you the letter, and I'm on a commission. I understand how frustrating that is that you don't get the stuff ahead of time. To give you a history of this project, I was hired, as you know, my credibility has been sort of questioned in the past on this, and I want to introduce you to myself. I think I've been before the commission for 40 years, coming before the commission for 40 years. I've worked all across the state doing wetlands work, 282 of the 351 cities and towns. I've taught to MACC, DCR. I've taught workshops. I've done thousands of delineations, thousands of applications, and been involved with appeals, adjudicatory hearings, Superior Court as an expert witness. And I'm just saying that. I'm also been on my commission for 36 years, and Board of Health for 6, which does mean that I'm certifiable by some psychiatric evaluation. Anyway, I was hired by the neighbor across the street who had a purchase and sale agreement and was going, the Pates were going to buy the property, and they wanted to build a house. And they had questions about wetlands restrictions because they were on the property, and they actually are the next door neighbors. and they saw what they thought were wetland conditions on the backside of this property. They hired me. We came out there. We looked at it in July of 2020 and found significant. The area was the site was a lawn, mostly lawn, sloping down to the rear of the property, and with a hedge along the right-hand side of the property up against 15 Meter Street. The area in the rear was a slightly lower area. It was, frankly, this is this lot was not filled as much as the other lots in the area. And so it was lower. And it was dominated, that area was dominated with cattails, jewelweed, moneywort. Okay, cattail is obligate, jewelweed is facultative wet, moneywort is obligate. It had swamp milkweed in there, which is obligate, marsh fern, facultative wet. It was dominated by wetland species. Cattails do not survive in areas where the water table drops below 6 inches below the surface. I observed the soils. I did soil augers in the area and found hydric soils. I found a black muck in there over a glade soil with models in it. I've definitely met the criteria of hydric soils. The hydrology, it was saturated to the surface and the water table was down about 3 or 4 inches in July. The area is a low area that does collect water. It was definitely a wetland, in my opinion. It was a shallow fresh marsh, and then the sedges and hydric vegetation came out into the lawn area, and then there was a shrub area on the north end over by 15 Meter Street that had hydric vegetation and soils. The applicant was not happy because they wanted to buy the property and they didn't. We told them that there was a wetland back there, and with that wetland came wetland setbacks, a 25-foot no disturb or 37.5-foot no disturb, 50-foot no structure, and that would limit what they could do on the property. It pushed it. I did provide them with a sketch, and I went back to, I did do research. I did look at all the aerial photographs. I looked at the soils map. The soils service does not map soil units less than an acre in size. So this would not have been picked up. And I also examined the notice of intent at 15 Meter Street, which did not have a wetland on it. And indicated on it, and that was done, I believe, in 2014. I was not involved with that project. However, I then contacted Jeff Carlson and asked him to do a site visit with me and see if he agreed with my findings. We did a site visit in August. We did look at the vegetation. It was dominated by obligate wetland species, which does not it sort of, if you read the DEP policy 95-1, it says if you do not have adequate vegetation to determine something as wetland, then you can go to soils. This was dominated by wetland species. It also had wetland soils. I met with Jeff and Joanne out there, and they agreed that it was a wetland. We looked at the soils, we looked at the vegetation. I did not carry this any further because my client backed away from the deal because of the wetland concerns, and we were not obligated to go any further with in documenting it with the Conservation Commission, I felt that the case had been made that it was a wetland. Looking at the photographs that were submitted, that were taken in 2021, it appeared when the lawn was not mowed as much, the wetland appeared to have expanded or become more evident in those photographs. And then looking at the evidence, the photographs from the disturbance during the enforcement process, it was evident to me that the entire site had been completely stripped of topsoil, and I don't know what else has happened out there. I can't testify. I wasn't there. But the grades appear to be higher than they were previously. Also, it's been stated that the whole reason that the site is disturbed is because they were removing all the trash and debris it was a dumping site. This site was a lawn. It was not a dumping site. It was a lawn, except for there was a little bit of debris in the hedge over. I'm sorry to take so long, but I want to make this clear. There was a lot of debris there was some debris along the line with 15 Meter Street in the bushes. I saw a few things in there. I did not do an extensive evaluation of it. And so the delineation, the evaluation that has been performed for this notice of intent was done after this site was completely disturbed. I believe that if they had seen the site before it was disturbed, and if Art Gasparo had seen the site before it was disturbed, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Jeff Carlson saw it. He thought it was a wetland, and other people have said the same thing. And so with that, and I mean, I think that you can still do something, or could do something with this property, and put a driveway in and a small lawn, but to ignore the fact that there was a wetland back there with those setbacks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for that perspective to go with your letter. I think that's helpful. Linda, your hand had been up, and then Stephen, I know yours has gone up again too, but I want to make sure Linda gets her comment out.
It's been so long, I don't remember what my comment was, except that the violation that's being alleged that you didn't follow through on the enforcement order, I guess, was that, how long ago was that? Was that a couple of years ago before I came on, correct?
It would have been like, yes, the year before you came on.
Okay, because I just want to make sure I didn't miss that. So I'll have to go back and take a look at that. But it's my understanding we never went forward with it, or we never finished the enforcement order?
Well, this is something I'm going to bring up, or was going to bring up during commissioners' comments. Just tracking enforcements, period, for us has gotten very difficult. And I think this is probably one of the ones that got a little bit lost, but that's, again, without me being able to track the information down tonight.
Only because I'm only asking that because if there are some that are still extant, before I came on, I'm not aware of them until this type of thing comes up in front of me and I'm going, oh, wait, what?
Oh, Linda, there are many that are out there floating.
What we need then is a full, because we used to do this regularly at the HTC. What are the enforcement orders? Every couple of months or every quarter, we would get an update on what the enforcement orders are, what the resolution was. So maybe we need a whole list of what's still out there that hasn't been gone after completely or at least finessed.
Yes, I think that's true. And at one point there was supposedly a website you could check it on, and then that we need to get on that. And I think maybe now with Will permanently as conservation staff, that can maybe be on his task list. I know he's been out really trying to check on these things, and hopefully we'll be able to track them a little bit better. Will, I see your hand up.
Well, one more comment. If we don't do it, the same thing happens at the ZBA and the planning board. If we don't carry out the enforcement, then people are just going to go ahead and do what they're going to do, and they're never going to get to enforcing me. So I'll just keep doing it vis-a-vis the one in Wisconsin. But I'd hate to have these things just sort of go by the way and people not be held accountable for whatever they did.
No, I agree, Linda, and I think we're doing our best, and coupled with the difficulty in actually following through with enforcements, then we have our hefty $50 fine to throw at people. So it, we obviously need to update and be more consistent with our enforcements. So thank you for bringing that up. Will, I know you were going to speak to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say from our end, and obviously I can't speak on anything that has happened before 4 months ago. But Morgan and I have really revamped our internal enforcement tracking. We have a really fantastic spreadsheet, and I think that things are being kept track of extremely clearly, and that's still kind of an evolving system for us. I think it can be made a lot better than it is today even, but things are being tracked very well.
Well, that's great, Will, and maybe we can get an update either at our next regular meeting or have some way to share that spreadsheet with commissioners and the
Absolutely.
public so we know what's going on.
Yep.
Ian, are you asking about the enforcement issue? I don't want to leave Stephen out there hanging because he's been up there for a while. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I have several things to say, but I'll just, so that Steve can comment. I'll just
No,
ask
Ian should go first.
Oh, thank you, Steve. So, Will, do you happen to know if 21 Meter Street is on your list?
So anything from prior to 4 months ago. So every new enforcement is on this database, but we need to get a handle on any of the old enforcements going back to who knows when. So we've kind of made a good process for everything going forward, but there needs to be some mining of the old files and whatnot to get everything into that database and streamline it all.
Thank you. So, so I absolutely feel that if we find out the enforcement order is still open, then that'll be a slam dunk. But even if it isn't, I think that we should insist that this be restored. And so, Steve, I completely agree with the case that you've made. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. And Stephen, now back to you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to agree with you and Ian here that and I appreciate the legal point that Seth brought up, but I don't think that he's correct in terms of differentiating between the enforcement action and the notice of intent here in terms of your authority. I think that you have the authority to order the replacement of those plants based on the photographic and other evidence, either as a condition of a approval or through the enforcement powers. And I think that, my client is not objecting to what's being proposed. My client is objecting to the eradication of the wetlands, which I think could easily be restored, and also objecting to the timbers, which are interrupting the ground flow of water and changing the elevation. So I think if the commission, and also, as noted, setting the ground for there to be a determination that there is no wetland here, and therefore they could do what they want, without any buffer zones later. So I think if the commission were to order that the timbers be removed, that the grade be restored, and that the plantings be restored, that would set the ground for the applicant to have to deal with whatever it is. If those are not wetland plants and it's not wetland soils, then then it's not. But if they are, then that should be restored and going forward on a future application for a structure taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Ian, I saw your hand up, and then Seth, I'll go to you.
And thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that not only does Stephen make a compelling case, but I've known David for the 10 years that I've been, David Haynes, the 10 years that I've been on this commission. And I absolutely accept what he says as being gospel on the subject. So thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, on the question of process, whether we have better authority through the enforcement or the notice of intent, I will admit that I don't know. That's just my opinion. Probably a question for Jeff or for council, but it just seems like violation issues are typically handled in the enforcement process. But if we have the ability to handle it through other ways, then I'll defer to whoever gives us that opinion. I'll say also, I apologize if Mr. Haynes's credibility is being questioned here. I think it's been evident in all the filings that we've had before us from him that he obviously knows what he's talking about in terms of wetland science. Just to clarify my comments a little bit, I think it's evidently clear that today on site, or when the notice of intent was submitted, the conditions on site at 21 meter did not indicate a vegetated wetland of any type. It is, it does seem like through the photos and testimony and plant information that in 2020, the area was suggestive of a freshwater marsh. If you look at the definition of freshwater marsh in the Nantucket wetland regulations, it's pretty indicative of the type of environment that Mr. Haynes was talking about. So I also would like to see restoration to that timeline if possible. The only thing that I've been trying to say that has given me hesitation is that it's important in our process, to make sure that we are basing our judgments off of facts and not off assumptions. And so I was hoping that we'd have more like concrete information, but I do feel comfortable with the photos and reviewing the obligate status of some of the wetland plants documented, that the conditions were more likely than not a freshwater marsh, but I'm not going to go far enough to say that it was definitely a freshwater marsh. That's where I land at this point.
Thank you, Seth. Any other questions or comments from commissioners or members of the public? David Haynes, I see your hand up.
Yes, I believe the enforcement order was from the spring of this year. I got a phone call from Jeff asking me if my clients had done anything out there on that site, and if I knew anything about it, and I said no, and I believe that was in the spring of this year. So that enforcement order is not that old. We have tried to get a copy of it and haven't been able to get a copy of what was said in that enforcement order. Also, I can't speak to it, but it appears that the grades have been played with out there, but I can't, it's so disturbed that I can't tell what had happened, but it appears to be slightly higher than it used to be. Definitely the back of the site was lower than the front of the site slightly, and now it's higher. Anyway, I think there's been some fill brought in, but that's hearsay to me. I can't testify to that, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Ashley, can I say one thing?
So I want to make sure that Art can speak because he's had his hand up, and then Diane, I'll go to you.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
happy to
thank
wait,
you.
Madam Chair.
Oh, okay. So
I can
Diane,
just address it all.
okay. Thank you, Art. Diane, go ahead.
My thing is just to back up what David said, is it was this spring. It wasn't 2 years ago or anything else. It was this spring, April. I think it was March when I first saw the plow thing in there, bright yellow. There was no question that it was there or not. And that's when he did it. It was in the spring. And remember that this spring through the summer was one of the driest we've had in the last 70 years. And still now the water is back and in the property and in the dirt and soil. So it's something I think that you really have to study longer as to the effects of the weather and everything else, because no rain for 5 months, 6 months, as it was, is going to dry out any soil. So I just want you to look really hard. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are going to track down this enforcement. Now I'm curious if the first notice of intent came in to try and rectify the enforcement and then got lost a little bit in the mix here. Art, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to take a couple minutes. A lot's been said here, and I'll try to keep track of it all. But we also have requested a copy of the enforcement. But essentially, we filed the first notice of intent in reaction to being asked to stop work, and the owner stopped work. He bought a property and started cleaning it up. In terms of no debris being there, the owner, he's told me that he's taken at least 6 dump truck fulls of all kinds of debris out of there, and it was subsurface, so most of it had been buried over the years. All kinds of old fencing and mixed type material of that nature. And that is, why it's sort of, in terms of the grades, looking like they've been altered. The site's much lower than it was in the plan. I made sure to, I put asterisks next to the spot elevations that included a note to say that was based upon where that topsoil had been removed and the grades were changed. There was a portion of the site that hadn't, that seemed like it was unaltered, and that's part of where at least one of the test borings had been done by Mr. Garneau. There seems to be a lot of speculation that's happening here, and certainly not to impugn anyone's credibility at all. It's certainly not at all. I've known Mr. Haynes a lot of years as well. And that's certainly not coming from us. The point here is that, we collected have the hard data collected on site, and that's what we're bringing before you now. In terms of the timber surround interfering with groundwater, it's only 2 rows of 5.5-inch landscape timbers. It doesn't go into the groundwater. You're only talking about 11 inches below grade. This isn't some big substantial wall. He had hopes that he was going to be able to raise that higher and stop the water that's coming on to this property from the other properties, but that's not, he understood that the commission had concerns with land subject to coastal storm flowage, and that wouldn't be okay with you. I somewhat question that in terms of the water still could flow. It was only on 3 sides. It could, still come and go off the other side. But again, that wasn't really a fight or an argument we wanted to go with the commission. We heard what you had to say, and you want to see the water be able to flow across there. And so, that's been changed. In terms of what's left, it's 11 inches. So I don't think there's any real point of, further disturbance out there or any kind of impact related to landscape timbers. It just seems, like there's nothing really to be had there, or that it's certainly not stopping any kind of groundwater. I think more seems to be being made of that than what it really is. Again, I would, remind the commission that, and maybe having a look at the, the aerial, the surrounding area, the structures that are built 5.5 feet away, just a few years ago from this area, that it's all the surrounding area. This isn't like this is abutting, other resource areas or contiguous. And I understand the definition of isolated, vegetated wetland, but we have, put it forth in the record, the findings from the site investigation, and believe that the project stands on its merits, and that we understand the enforcement order as related to work within land subject to coastal storm flowage, and it's really just to make that right with the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Any questions or comments for Art or in general at this point from the public or the commission?
Madam Chair, if I could speak for a second, Glenwood.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, how are you? Good evening. I'm counsel for the property owner. I just would like to, I guess, reiterate Art's point about the development that goes on and and has gone on around the property. And even when the commission members saw the property after the rain on Sunday, the water on the property is coming from off the property. And basically, it is the legal responsibility of every property owner to handle the water on their own property. So I just sort of question, to some extent, the site conditions past or present, or even how one would determine how to do some kind of mitigation. The reality is that if the other property owners weren't creating a water trespass onto this property, the conditions on it could well be different. We've submitted our data showing what the groundwater elevation is, and I think that that's an important instrument to show what the issue is. So if the surface water wasn't directed from other of the properties from the adjacent developments, that would be a change condition too. So I think that that is an important point presently and then moving forward as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I do wish we had better stormwater management policies island-wide to try and stop this water trespass, as you call it. So thank you for that. Again, any other questions or comments from commissioners? If not, Art, what would you like to do here? I know there's some questions still out there. It sounds like this enforcement order might be floating in space, like we're having trouble locating it. So I, for one, would like to see that before I make a decision at this point. But what would you guys like to do?
Well, I guess I would wonder what that, the real bearing of that is. I certainly don't want to go against you, Madam Chair, but the difference in terms of what that, we came back to the commission to restore the site for work that was done. So I guess I'm not sure what comes out of if that document is found or not found, and the fact that the owner doesn't seem to have it. The commission doesn't seem to have it. It's not in the online files. Why I don't want to just drag this on and on either. We're taking an awfully lot of the commission's time. I'm not trying to force anything either here, but I don't really know what else I would provide to the commission at this point. And I don't want to see us come back in 2 weeks and I don't think you want that either, to do that again. So I don't know really what, comes out of that one piece. I think we've, provided everything that, that we can. And if that's the only piece of things and it's from the commission side, I'm not even sure that it's out there.
Nope, I totally understand your point. So I take it you would like to close?
Glenn?
Yeah, I think we probably can, Madam Chair. I mean, I think Art's point is that, assuming the EO is issued, we followed it whether it was issued or not. The cease and desist, is in place. Obviously, there was a tier of the wood, as Art described, taken off. But I'm not sure, would be, I assume the EO, assuming it was actually formally issued, would just basically say, stop work and come in front of the Concom.
Yeah, it probably would. I guess it just identifies maybe more of the wetland. I guess I just want to prepare you for an order of conditions that might remove the remaining timbers and potentially ask for some mitigation. There's just been enough discussion amongst commissioners around that. I want to just make sure you're aware. Ian, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So addressing both Glenn and Art, that, if the enforcement order had come before the commission, speaking for myself, I would have said absolutely restore the wetland to what it was. And so I would very much, and that's my position now, regardless of whether if it's closed, then that's that would be my recommendation in our orders of conditions. So it's up to you whether or not you want to close, but either way, I don't want to reward bad behavior. And here I would say that the behavior which would appear to be beyond your control, Art, is something that I think we need to address. And Glenn, to your point, we would have done if it had come before us. So something tells me that the enforcement order is still floating out there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. And I do apologize because obviously there's been some paperwork lost in the office on our side. It sounds like so. We have to take ownership of that.
Madam Chair, I think what we should do then, just to have full comfort on this, is we should just continue for a couple of weeks so that we can search out the EL. I mean, one of the queries I have, and I appreciate Ian's comments, is if the commission was, or members were leaning towards some restoration amount. I mean, I have no idea how one would even determine what to do. I mean, we've got a few photographs that show some cattails. We have no other hydric soil data except ours that's official. The groundwater data shows, the only groundwater data is ours. It shows that doesn't meet the definition of your vegetated wetland, isolated wetland. I mean, you also have no square footage size for your isolated vegetated wetland, which is rare in Massachusetts. Almost every community has a number, and most of them are much larger than even if there was a small isolated wetland. This wouldn't even be jurisdictional in the vast majority of towns that have a numerical square footage number to it. So I'm not exactly sure how we would restore to what square footage, but I think maybe it would be best for us to continue and mull this a little bit more and see if we can figure it out a little bit better.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wood, for saying that, and I apologize from the commission's end for the loss in paperwork and tracking there, but I appreciate you requesting the continuance. So would you like to continue until February 2nd?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your participation. This is a more difficult one than it should be. So that moves us on to Drexler at 95 Washington Street, represented by Leo Azadorian.
Hope everybody can hear me. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Leo Azadorian for Blackbone Associates for the applicant, Blake Drexler. The proposal is for the construction of a 340 square foot garage in the back of his property. Since I submitted the NOI, we did stake out the location of the garage. The owner asked that we slided an extra foot towards the southwest, so the structure ended up 7.1 feet from the existing structure. I had put it there originally because of some of the privet that we wanted to maintain, but they wanted more clearance between there and their structure. The other change that I did make was I lowered the floor slab down to 5.25 feet. And the reason for that is after further review of the structural engineer's plans and the smart vent requirements, that the bottom of the vents had to be no more than 12 inches above the finished grade out there. So we lowered the floor down in order to meet that requirement. It's a wood construction. The foundation is constructed on a 20-inch thick concrete slab. And I submitted the plans, the structural engineer's plans, along with the application. And that's pretty much it. There's not a lot of more that I could add to it, other than it's just a simple garage being placed in. And if you do look through the notice that I submitted, there were a lot of easements, cross easements between Great Harbor Yacht Club and the owner himself. It's pretty busy, but there were cross conveyances between the two parties in order to allow the parking lot to go in for Great Harbor Yacht Club and for the owner to access. There was also a parking space in the back in the southwest corner that's dedicated towards Mr. Drexler as well. But there's full access to get to the back of his property and where the garage is going. And with that, I'll entertain any questions or any concerns that anybody has.
Thank you, Leo. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might be a very minor concern, but proposed around the garage is a 5 by 10 foot concrete apron proposed to facilitate ingress and egress. And while I understand that you need ingress and egress, we shouldn't have poured concrete that's impermeable in the land subject to coastal storm flowage, because we can't, by our performance standards, reduce the ability of the site to absorb and contain floodwaters. So I would just ask that they change that to a pervious surface such as gravel or grass pave or something else. Thank you.
I think that's doable.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Leo. Linda, I see your hand up.
I was gonna say the same thing as Seth, but can you put your map back up there again? Leo?
I think Will was screen sharing. He's doing it.
Will was screen sharing. How are you getting to it? Off the easement?
Correct. The property line is shown on there that Blake actually owns. And then there's an easement, an access easement, and there's actually cross easements between Great Harbor Yacht Club and Drexler themselves. So we're just basically coming in off of the roadway, Washington Street, to the back, and you can see where the vehicle is parked. That's actually one of Blake's vehicles, and he has full access to the back of the property.
Out of morbid curiosity, that's a second curb cut on the same lot? Or is it coming off the easement?
It's coming off the easement.
Okay, you know where I'm headed with that. Okay, I just couldn't figure out how you were getting into the garage. Okay, I got it. I do agree with Seth about the impervious surface.
Thank you, Linda. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no, so we'll open it up for public comment. So public comment on 95 Washington Street. Does not appear that we have any public comment on YouTube or on the call. Will, do we have everything we would need to close this one?
Yes, we do.
Leo, would you like to close?
Yes, I would.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Mark. Is there
A second.
Joe got you on the second. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. That moves us on to 14 North Road LLC at 14 North Road, represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much, Brian Madden from LEC, representing the applicants. So the proposed project is replacement of the existing set of beach stairs with an elevated wooden set of stairs. The proposed set of stairs is going to be 3 feet wide and elevated 12 to 18 inches off the existing coastal bank. It's going to be supported by helical piles. We included a profile of the set of stairs, and immediately, so there's a set of stairs, straight shot down with a small little landing in the middle, given the length. And what's also being proposed is 6 cubic yards of sand nourishment immediately east of the set of stairs that is currently an area washout. I submitted a photograph of what that area currently looks like, basically abutting the adjacent bulkhead that extends onto the property within an easement. You can see there's some erosion and scour there, and given its proximity to the set of stairs, we just wanted to shore that up and stabilize and replenish the coastal bank, which does provide a sediment source to the coastal beach and dune in the immediate vicinity. Certainly that's going to be compatible, clean sand nourishment. And again, it's only a total of 6 cubic yards, so a small amount that'll be delivered via chute over from the top of the coastal bank and can just be hand raked into place. But with that, I will turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd request that following the delivery and raking of the sand, that we also request vegetative plantings to further shore up that coastal bank. Could be something as easy as beach grass or a couple shrubs, but it's within our purview to do that, so to prevent future washouts in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd certainly be amenable to that.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. Try and keep some of that sand in place a little longer.
Exactly. Thank you, Seth.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? If not, we'll open it up for public comment. So public comment on 14 North Road. Does not appear that we have any public comment on YouTube. Quiet group tonight. Will, do we have everything we would need to close?
Yes, we do.
Ryan, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close?
So move, Madam Chair.
Motion made by Linda, seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Garrisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Brian.
Take care.
And that moves us on to Nantucket Boathouse LLC at 2 and 6 Easton Street, represented by Cole Bateman.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Share my screen. Hi, my name is Cole Bateman from Coastal Engineering Company on behalf of the applicant Stephen Bartram for 2 and 6 Easton Street. This project consists of a marine pier replacement and a bulkhead alteration for a coastal structures. Here's the site plan here. The bulkhead consists of an approximately 136 foot long timber bulkhead. The proposed bulkhead replacement or alterations is to install another one directly in front of it. There's also a couple returns, a 4 foot long one on the east side and a 24 foot long one on the west side. The pier portion of the project consists of replacing in the same footprint an existing timber pier. The timber pier is currently in good condition. However, it's pretty low in the water. It limits access along the beach. Our applicant is interested in raising the structure to facilitate increased storm management, as well as to improve access along the shore. We anticipate the need to go in front of ZBA and HDC as well. And there's a moratorium on new piers, I'm sure as many of you know. And one of the probably action items in our project is to go for a zoning board of appeal special permit for the island perimeter regulations. And that's why we're proposing to raise it to meet the Chapter 91 access because that seems to be the basis of those regulations. Some changes along. There are going to be some changes of the pier aside from the raised. We're proposing to change the pile layout. We're actually reducing the total number of piles. We're making it more of a constructible spacing for more contemporary materials. Like I said before, it's going to be raised. It's about 3 feet higher than currently, and it's just about enough to allow for that 5-foot access, like I mentioned. The floats and the float piles are also requested to be replaced. There is currently a Chapter 91 license for all structures, including the groins, which we do not propose doing any work for. And included in that Chapter 91 license is a licensed 30-foot gangway. Currently, I believe it's a 24-foot long gangway. We're proposing to bring it back to the license 30 to meet the to make it a more accessible pier, given that it's being raised. I guess I'll go on and address some of the comments from the Division of Marine Fisheries. We did receive a letter from them. For the most part, didn't have any real major concerns except for a time of year restriction. Other things that they mentioned were to be during the demolition of the existing pier to remove piles below the mudline, which we surely could accomplish. And I believe that should do it for my comments. I'll return to you, Madam Chair, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. When you stop screen sharing, I can go to questions.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Bateman, for your application and presentation. I'm just concerned that there is not a suitable alternatives analysis for the bulkhead replacement in this file. There's 3 alternatives listed. It takes up a couple of sentences in the 39-page application, and one of them is essentially no change. So we're talking about 2 alternatives, and the burden of proof is on the applicant when any bulkheads, groins, or other coastal engineering structures are set to be replaced. The burden of proof is on the applicant to show that there's no way to use a more environmentally friendly solution to control erosion on that site that exists within the performance standards for coastal beach, coastal bank, and land under the ocean. So I'd request that the applicant relook at the alternatives and submit a more suitable analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Ian, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So may I ask when the mean high water elevation was calculated, Mr. Bateman?
Yes, I can give an exact date. However, it was sometime in this past spring summer. We were out there and we did it with the hydrographic survey, and then we also went onto the beach using the NOAA tide station that's in Nantucket Harbor as a reference.
So, and where I'm going with, I'm sure you know from this question, is whether or not there's public access between the mean high and mean low watermark. And so you're saying in your drawing that it doesn't actually intrude into the mean high watermark. Under a Chapter 91 license, obviously, the public is guaranteed access between the mean high and the mean low.
Yes, do you mind if I share my screen again, please?
Go ahead.
And I apologize for not showing this before. The current license structure does extend over mean high water. The proposed structure, what we're proposing is to raise it so that there is a 5-foot wide access beneath to meet that accessibility.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Mark?
Thank you, Ashley. I support Seth's comment. This is an ideal spot for an alternative to replacing the bulkhead. Living shoreline comes to mind. It looks like it's a fairly stable shoreline. The pier I know is grandfathered and it's allowable to be replaced. But I'm worried about another bulkhead. I'm not sure that there isn't a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Linda, I see your hand up.
I'm not an anti-bulkhead. I've done research on every single thing, all the way from the White Elephant, all the way out east and all the way down Halbert Avenue, looked at every chapter 91 for another project down on Halbert Avenue, as well as another project on Easton Street further down. And when there is a hole, there is almost a continuous bulkhead all the way from this property, all the way down to the property in between the breakers, which has a bulkhead, and the White Elephant, which increased their bulkhead and raised it many years ago, which caused the problem with the one in between. When there's a hole, the water goes to the path of least resistance, which is this property, and certainly the one at the other end. And same thing happened on Halbert Avenue, which is why most of them have bulkheads. There are a few that don't, and that's where the water comes in, because I've been down there in a kayak when the water has come through these properties, because there is no bulkhead to try to stave it off. I am not opposed to a bulkhead, and I'm opposed to making them do something else, since every single house along there has a bulkhead.
Thank you, Linda. I think many of those bulkheads were permitted before the Wetlands Protection Act and our bylaw, and I think we've learned a lot since then. And even though they might protect the shoreline, then there's wave energy that reflects off them and impacts other areas. And some of the alternatives might offer the same protection as a bulkhead, but actually be better for the resource area in general. I totally hear what you're saying, but I am up for hearing some alternatives. Seth, I saw your hand up.
I just have one more comment to that, Madam Chair, if you will. I know a lot of those bulkheads have been allowed to be replaced or altered or repaired over time, even though I know one chapter 91 came from 1890, or the agreement to have the bulkhead came from 1890 from the state. So I'm just questioning if we've allowed everybody else on both sides, Halbert Avenue and here, to repair or replace bulkheads. I think we're headed into trouble if we all of a sudden decide to, I don't want to use the word arbitrary and capricious because that's a HDC term, go that direction on this one property, which is the furthest one out and gets hit pretty good, both directions, especially in a northeast wind and an easterly wind, which pushes that water in there pretty badly. So I'm just concerned about that. That's my soapbox for today.
Thank you, Linda. We recently denied a bulkhead replacement, and I am kind of excited to see how that ends up playing out. And then we'll get, the full kind of perspective from DEP on these alternatives analysis. So I think the jury's out there a little bit.
That one will be back, by the way.
Most of them come back to us. Seth, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Linda, I hear what you're saying. But this process isn't about being anti-bulkhead or pro-bulkhead. Ultimately, once we receive a suitable analysis, we may determine that a bulkhead is the right alternative on that site, or we might determine that something is better suited. Our regulations require us to do this analysis. We don't have a say in this. We are required to look for more environmentally friendly alternatives before we permit a bulkhead. So I'm just asking that we go forward with that process. I've asked every single time that a bulkhead has come in over the last 4 years for this process. So it's not an entirely new thing. Applicants, I think, listen, and I hope that they continue to listen and submit these alternatives ahead of time before we, have to make them continue hearings. But it's within our regulatory responsibility to take these alternatives, whether we ultimately go with them or not. I will just say too, With respect to Mr. Bateman, I am a little bit concerned in your application that only the resource areas and performance standards are under the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act were documented. You know, in there's two permitting schemes that we have to operate under: the state act and the local regulations. And there's a great discussion of the state performance standards, but there's really no discussion of the local performance standards. So please look back into those local performance standards and document how you can create this application in alignment with those performance standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Cole Bateman, I see your hand up. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, and I appreciate the input from the commission. I do want to make two more, actually just one more point. This is a pre-78 structure. I wouldn't say it's immediately threatened by the removal of this. However, it is a coastal bank and it is a pre-78 home, just for your consideration as well.
Thank you. We still require that alternatives analysis when looking at the bulkhead replacement, whether it's pre-78 or not.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners or from the public? RJ, were you just putting your hand up? Okay, RJ, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. RJ Turcotte on behalf of the Nantucket Land Council, and we're at the Land Council in agreement with the commission here that this really has to be asked every time one of these comes in at this point, and not necessarily looking for any sort of different outcome, but the question definitely needs to be asked and the process followed every time so that we don't end up putting structures back in areas where we could be making progress on resilience and more environmentally friendly options. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. Seth?
Just quickly, because I don't want to be repetitive, but I will say, I've previously submitted information to the commission documenting how using other alternatives apart from bulkheads, like nature-based solutions, living shorelines, things like that, are much more protective of resource areas and generally are actually financially more reasonable in the long term for the applicant as well. So I'm happy to resubmit any of those articles. But all we're asking for is that the applicant and the representative just look at these alternatives and see what's possible, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Seth. So at this point, it doesn't look like there are any other questions or comments from commissioners or the public. Mr. Bateman, what would you like to do here?
May I just ask one more question and then I'll make a request for a continued. I would like to ask the commission's if they have any more comments on the pier itself. If we were to come back with the continuance, is there any comments to relate to the pier directly, or is it mostly just to the bulkhead?
For me, it's mostly just the bulkhead. I am concerned about extending the pier, how that's going to go over for you, like as far as some of the Chapter 91 permitting, but I'm happy to see it raised up and fixed. I don't know how other commissioners feel, if you have questions or comments regarding the pier.
I'm fine.
Okay. So it looks like the questions really are around the bulkhead and alternatives analysis for that bulkhead piece and making sure that you're looking at our local bylaw as well.
Thank you. Yes, so we would like to make a request for a continuance, please.
Okay, our next meeting is on February 2nd. Would you like to continue until that date?
Yes, may I please just have a reminder of when the next deadline would be?
Looks like Will's looking at that.
Sorry, mute issues. Are we looking for the NOI submission deadline?
additional materials.
Additional materials. So we have.
Usually it's the Friday before, right? They can submit
Yeah.
and go in the
It's the
packet.
2nd of February.
The meeting is the 2nd of February. I
Oh.
think the January 27th, I believe, is the date that I have on my little.
Right, which is that Friday before,
Friday.
so that it goes into our packet.
Just trying to mislead you, Will.
It's all right, Ian.
All right, so this will continue until February 2nd. All right, so that moves us on to Nantucket Land Trust at 3 Baltimore Street, represented by David Haynes.
Good evening. How's everybody tonight? This is a project for the Nantucket Land Trust on the south side of Baltimore Street between Starbuck and Nantucket Road. They have a piece of land that extends all the way down to Nantucket Road and where Starbuck Road comes out. And this involves basically brush removal, brush hogging to create basically a fire break and also enhance the wildlife habitat in that area. The work is when it's vacant land. There is a small southern portion of it is in the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland on the opposite side of the road, and also that's the buffer zone also to land subject to coastal storm flowage, which does not extend onto the site across Baltimore. The area is within a natural heritage and endangered species habitat, and we filed with them. We received their response at 5:02 this afternoon. I was really happy for that. They have acknowledged that if we use the appropriate seed mix in there, that's all basically native seeds for any seeding, that the project is exempt. So we've got a clear path on that. What is proposed is to go in and brush hog the area that's shown on the plan, leaving brush in some areas along the backs of the properties on either side and going up through the middle, leaving any of the significant pitch pines, taking out any of the black pines, and leaving clumps of some of the other shrubs in the middle that are significant. No regrading will occur, no fertilizers, no irrigation. It's basically an enhancement project with no regrading. The seed mix that we proposed was a wildlife seed mix with little blue stem. We can work on any details of that and have it approved by the staff or the commission prior to do that. We don't expect to do much seeding out there, because once you take out the brush, the existing herbaceous layer will thrive and expand, and so we don't expect to need to do much seeding at all. And that's basically the project. It's a little bit, hopefully it's not as controversial as some of the other ones around. But with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, David. So I'm curious because I haven't seen the natural heritage letter that always comes in like just before the meeting. Did they speak to the pitch pine at all? I'm just wondering, given the status of the northern long-eared bat and the fact that pitch pine is known habitat for them, I know I would like to see kind of all the pitch pine remain if possible.
If I may, we plan on preserving the pitch pine. They did not address the bat situation. They addressed it. They were concerned about the dotted chain geometry. which like shrubs, so.
And
you know,
bats like moths, so it's a perfect little.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, have one endangered species eating another one. That's the way we got it.
I saw Seth's hand go up, and then Ian, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple quick points. So I also think we should preserve the pitch pine. And then in terms of cutting of trees, I think this is federal law now anyways, but we should add it to our orders of condition that no work can happen between June 1st and July 31st. That's to preserve northern long-eared bats during their breeding cycle. We should just be putting those in our orders anyways, even though that I think is federal law at this point. And then in general, I'm fully in support with the goals of this project, but I have a couple of like technical questions or technical requests, maybe. I see that the area is predominantly native shrubs, but there's a lot of Japanese black pine and honeysuckle in there as well. And I am concerned that if you just go and take a machine and brush hog everything, you have the potential to spread those species. So I think there's a few ways of getting around it. The first and probably the hardest is before brush hogging, selectively going in and hand cutting and removing those species. The second, which is a little bit less time intensive and less specific, is restricting the time of cutting to well outside of the growing season or whenever there would be any seed material left over. And then the third thing is just having appropriate monitoring to make sure that if those invasive plants do regrow, that they continue to be removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to go one step further than Seth, and I would actually like to see a plan of where the trees are that are going to be kept and where, because I share their concern. I was going to make a wisecrack of where is the putting green going, because it sounds very much so that is the approach, but perhaps I would say that afterwards, having a drink with you, David. But really, I would like to make sure that we know what is being preserved. And so I'd like to see a detailed plan. I don't know what my fellow commissioners feel on the subject, but we know how casual some people can be when it comes to cutting trees down. Thank you.
David, how feasible do you think that is to maybe mark, or GIS point the large trees?
Well, I mean, I would, it's a fair amount of field work and a fair amount of survey work. I would prefer it if we could flag they want to preserve what they had said was significant pitch pines. We can try to preserve every pitch pine that's even in there. Go after the black pines, but we could actually flag it, go in and have somebody flag them before the brush hog goes in there and make sure that doesn't happen. I would, is in terms of cost of survey and identification, it's pretty thick in there to go around and to pick them up with a survey. That would be more difficult, but definitely try to preserve all of the pitch pine that's in there is well within it, and all the time limitations of that Seth brought up. Happy to do that. I think it should be done in the winter, and which is an easier time to do it because you can see much better, and you can pick out the pitch pines and take out the Japanese black pines. I guess I would have to talk to my client and see how, and Jeff Blackwell, the surveyor, and see what they thought that was the feasibility of actually doing a field survey of all the trees.
Well, if I may,
frankly,
Madam Chair, I'm perfectly happy for the flagging proposal.
I think that's a better thing because you've got to do that for the brush hog anyway.
Right.
So I would say the prior flagging of all the pitch pines prior to the work commencing is a reasonable request.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Actually, more than that, I think it's a good idea.
Thank you, David. And I know in the past we've conditioned it so that, maybe staff is out on site before the brush hog goes through. And we're lucky enough, we have this guy on staff who's like an expert certified arborist. So he could probably be a really good resource in this case. So I think that sounds good. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? If not, we'll open it up to the public. I saw Tony Butler, your hand went up.
Yes. Tony Butler, Nantucket Land Trust. I have been through the site pretty extensively with just to try to identify trees that could potentially be saved. And we've taken some GIS points, and I think we have a map. There's really no pitch pine on the site that we could find. It's generally Japanese black pine. There's a lot of black cherry, which is in pretty good shape, that we'd like to try to keep, clumps of them. And in general, that's it.
Thank you for that information. That's good perspective for us. Any other questions from the public? Not seeing anything on YouTube tonight. So if there aren't any other questions or comments, Will, do we have everything we would need to close?
We do with that last minute MISA letter, so
yes,
everything is here. NHESP, sorry.
David, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
It looks like Mark is making that motion.
Second.
Seconded by Linda. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.
You too. So that moves us to Gifford Carlin at 28 Sheep Pond Road, represented by Paul Santos.
Thank you. On behalf of the property owner and applicant, Ben Gifford and Jane Carlin, Paul Santos from Nantucket Surveyors. This is a notice of intent for work at 28 Sheep Pond Road. It is a site located along an eroding shoreline that many of you are familiar with. This application is for the proposed septic system abandonment within the buffer zone to a coastal bank and installation of a tight tank that will occur outside of Concom Conservation Commission jurisdiction. The dwelling's leach pit had been exposed to the coastal bank due to erosion some months back, and the exposure was forwarded to the property caretaker and then ultimately to us, and at which time we had notified both the Board of Health and the Conservation Natural Resources staff. So we proceeded to remove the leach pit, which was still partially located within the bank. That was done under Nantucket Surveyors supervision. Notice was given to both the Board of Health and Natural Resources at that particular time. We now have subsequently filed this notice of intent to further go in and remove the existing septic tank and remove the building sewer that is connected to the existing dwelling. We would be taking the tank completely off the property along with the distribution box. So any further erosion that would occur some years down the road, we would not be in the same position that we were just in. So it's essentially an after the fact notice of intent for at least the removal of the leach pit, but we are seeking the order of conditions to now remove the septic tank and the distribution box and the building sewer that's within Concom jurisdiction. That's the extent of the application. We will be applying applying to the Board of Health for a tight tank on this property. But as I had said, that's going to occur outside of the 100-foot setback to the coast. So happy to answer any questions that you may have with regard to the application.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no, so we'll open it up for public comment. 28 Sheep Pond Road. Also does not look like we have public comment. Will, do we have everything we would need to close?
Yes, we do.
Paul, would you like to close?
Yes, thank you.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Ian,
Seconded.
seconded by Linda. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So that moves us on. We don't have any amended orders. We have no RDAs, no minor mods. So that brings us to certificates of compliance. We have AC East Lincoln LLC at 1 East Lincoln Avenue. Will, are you going to take these for us? Awesome.
All right. So this is 1 East Lincoln Avenue. We went out to the site. Everything is as portrayed on the plan. I don't think that there's going to be any ongoing conditions or anything for this property. That's about all I have to say about this one.
Thank you, Will. Any questions or comments from commissioners? And if not, would somebody like to make a motion to issue the cert?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Seth got you, so motion made by Seth. I'll give you the second, Linda. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. That brings us to Nantucket Islands Land Bank at 231 Pulpus Road.
And so this is the Reyes Pond property. My dog and I are both very familiar with this, and we have everything that we would need to issue the cert. Everything's as portrayed. That is it.
Will, question, do they need any ongoing conditions for like invasive species management or anything?
So for this one, I do think it may be good to speak with Rachel or something. I can't speak to that for this property, what they might want to do there. They have another one on the agenda later that I think is more clear for that purpose, but
I know they had done some out here is why I'm curious. Seth, I saw your hand pop up.
Yeah, I know that there was Scotch broom and weeping love grass removal, or it might still be in process. So we should definitely have the ongoing conditions related to the invasive species management carry through.
Great. Any other questions or comments on this one? Looks like no. So Will, do you have that order in front of you just so we can list the invasive species conditions that need to be carried?
I believe what they have submitted is missing that page. I don't know the number that corresponds to the off the top of my head. Trying to see if I have another one.
I mean, I think in speaking to Jeff a few weeks ago, I think we could probably issue with verbally discussing conditions without listing the numbers, but that depends on how my fellow commissioners feel and if they would feel more comfortable holding it. I'm fine with that too. Seth?
Yeah, I'd rather do it. I'd rather have the ongoing conditions in place before issuing. I will say,
I agree with Seth.
Can you look up the order by the order number? Well, it looks like it's SE 482981.
SE 48.
It says specifically, management of invasive species and vegetation.
Right.
And
And
so,
the
I'd like
next
to
one
get
for the
back to
land
what we're
bank, I
gonna
think.
order going forward. I can't believe that we just said that they would only be doing it for the first 3 years.
Right. Sorry, guys, bear with me here.
No, no worries. It's good for everybody to practice patience.
We're so
We really have to practice that
I mean, I repeat myself like
all
literally
day.
10,000 times a day.
A
So
day. That particular age group doesn't have patience.
no, teenagers do not have patience.
Neither does my 16-month-old.
Well, neither does my 26-year-old. So there you go.
All right, I have some files coming up now. Just bear with the computer.
That's going to take a whole lot more patience, people. So
Yeah, technology.
All right. That's the minor mod. So I have the findings and additional conditions from the original NOI.
yep, that's what we would want.
Okay. Yep. Do you want me to share my screen so you guys can just see this?
Yeah, that would be great.
So. So can we add an ongoing condition in here?
We can't add conditions, but what we would say is like condition number 19, plant material removed, like that sort of stuff would be ongoing.
Yeah.
Yeah, 19, 21, 22, and 24, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So will essentially what we need to do as the commission is somebody would just make a motion to issue the cert listing out those condition numbers, and then they would be recorded with the certificate of compliance.
Right. Yep. Okay. And I have that all written down for the COC, but.
Awesome.
Is that what you're asking for now? Is a motion for that?
Yes, if there's no other questions or comments, we'd be looking for a motion to issue the cert with ongoing conditions 19, 21, 22, and 24 related to invasive species management and removal.
That's my motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Seth. So motion made by Linda, seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And that moves us to Nantucket Islands Land Bank at 21 North Cambridge Street.
All right, so this was some more vegetation management. I believe it was cypress spurge. I'm going to share the photos with you guys. And as we are looking at this, I'm trying to grab that additional order or that order because I think the ongoing conditions for invasive species are probably going to be potentially necessary here.
Yes, thank you, Will. While Will's pulling that up, any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no.
I make sure this is the right one. This is going all the way back to 2009, but
Yeah, that looks too, I thought the Cypress Spurge was a really recent filing with them within the last like 2 years or so.
I think it was actually a different notice of intent, but
then this one. So this is the file number that's listed on the agenda.
Okay.
Let
'cause
me.
they definitely did do work, Cypress Spurge work there, but I think that might have been under a different order.
Okay.
Let's see.
So let's read this one. What one are we trying to close out tonight?
I'm looking at,
now.
Mark, were you talking to us?
I don't think so.
maybe not.
Um,
So there are two, but they both go back to 2009. The one that you're seeing right now.
I can go into the registry if you need me to check what's on file.
yeah, I just
I
want
mean,
to
I
make
can
sure,
check
like
at the
what,
same time, but
and what did you go out? So, Will, what did you go out and confirm as part of this process? Because I think that would be helpful since you guys have to look at it. If you weren't actually looking at the removal of these buildings, then we should probably
right.
hold.
Yeah, so that's all for building removal. This, from what I understood, was for. Oh, this is entirely my fault. I confused this with the other order that was for Cypress Spurge removal. This is the 2009 order for removal of existing structures and appurtenances.
And it's the one we're supposed to be looking at.
That is the one.
Okay. So Will, have you been out to the site to confirm that everything was done?
There's no structures there.
All right. I don't think there's anything if it was just, and the birding view platform has been constructed.
Yep.
Okay.
Can you scroll down to where the actual conditions are?
Oh, sorry, Seth. Additional conditions here.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's any.
fully vegetated at this point, so I don't know that these are, they're certainly not relevant to be ongoing, I guess.
Right.
So, Will, again, you went out to the site, you confirmed that everything meets the conditions in the order.
Yep.
And think
You
we
can
insert.
you can see the current conditions of the area here. And I think there's a couple more photos.
Okay. Awesome. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? It's like no. So if not, with some Ian?
Yeah, move to approve.
Okay. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And that moves us to Callan Miller Incorporated at 117 Orange Street.
All right. So this COC was for a front deck and a little bit of associated landscaping with the, I believe this is that Isaiah Fitness
Yes.
building here. This is all as it is supposed to be. I have the findings up, but I don't think there's any continuing conditions on this at all.
Thank you, Will. Any questions or comments from commissioners on this one? Looks like no. So would somebody like a motion to issue the cert? Linda, was that a question?
No, just a motion.
Oh, it came through fuzzy. All right, Linda's making the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And that moves us on to our orders of conditions. We have Easton Street LLC at 55 Easton Street.
And I'll share these live as we go through them as well, but I think everybody should have received the packet if you need it. So we have standard conditions 18 and 19 on here. I'm not sure if there's anything else we'd like to see in addition to this. 55 Easton.
We should probably add our no cultivar condition in reference to the vegetated hedge.
Yes.
That's going to be put in the back.
Ooh.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments from commissioners on this one?
Cultivirus is spelled incorrectly.
Oh. I swear I know how to spell it.
Oh, I could not live type like, oh, it would be bad. I respect you, Will, for doing.
The pressure, it just makes my words per minute go way down.
Any other questions, comments, amendments from commissioners? And if not, would somebody like to make a motion to issue as amended? Ian? Are you making that? Okay, Ian's making that motion. Is there seconded by Mark? So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Excuse me, and that should bring us to Drexler at 95 Washington Street.
Yep. And here, I've already added in the garage apron shall be a pervious surface rather than poured concrete. I wasn't sure if we want to list examples or if just saying a pervious surface is sufficient.
Pervious is fine.
Yeah, I'm fine with pervious. Any questions?
I have a question. It wasn't just the ramp, was it? Did they have an apron around the whole structure?
Yeah, it was. I think in the order says apron, but it was an apron for ingress and egress. So yeah, around the whole thing.
Yeah, so I don't want to just say the ramp into the garage. I want to say that however you want to define it, the concrete pad around the building.
Yeah.
This order does not permit impervious surface around the garage structure.
Yeah, could we say exceeding the, well, you can't say the footprint of the structure if that is the footprint, right?
Yeah, no, it's just that they've expanded the pad around the structure unnecessarily.
Right. So let's say. Just trying to think of how to word this correctly. I think
How about the word extraneous?
It's a good word. We'll say the
garage apron, Will?
Yeah, so I had it as garage apron initially, but to me that kind of just means the
entrance
to the actual door. But if we're concerned about the entire pad that extends beyond the
I think we
building.
just say then this permit does not allow any impervious surface around the new structure. And then they have to make whatever is around that structure pervious.
That works. including the ramp.
Yeah, and maybe we say including the apron on the plan if that's what they listed it as.
Because they're gonna go slab on grade, so I don't know why they'd have to get all crazed about it.
That should do it.
Feel like that's sufficient?
Yep, I think it's good.
All right.
So would somebody like to make a motion to issue as amended?
So
So
moved.
moved, Madam Chair. Second.
All right, so I'll give Seth the motion and you the second, Linda, by roll vote. Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And that should move us on to 14 North Road LLC at 14 North Road.
All right. So 14 North Road, we have our 1819, and then condition that the area of washout to be nourished shall be revegetated with beach grass or native shrubs, and 21, all plantings shall be native species with no cultivars.
So,
Probably need some photographic monitoring of that nourished area or beach grass.
yeah, survivability condition and a monitoring condition. And if I may, Madam Chair,
Yep, go ahead.
I'll let Will type if he wants, but related to the nourishment material itself, the sand, I'd like a condition that says all nourishment sand shall be beach compatible sand evidenced by grain size and Munsell color analysis.
Thoughts, Seth?
Yeah.
A good one, thank you.
As opposed to pieces of brick and plastic pipe.
You don't like that?
Why not?
HTC would have a problem.
All sand to be used in nourishment of the washout area. They shall be compatible to the existing material based on grain size and Munsell color analysis.
Yes.
And then do we want yearly reporting or do you want to?
I mean, sometimes when we have, well, it's more with coastal engineering that we require like reporting after storms. I guess yearly reporting for the life of the permit would be good.
I think yearly is fine, and I know at one point to ease the burden on staff, we were actually putting the dates that we wanted yearly monitoring reports to come in into the orders of conditions themselves. So Will, if you could find one of those and match that, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And then I would say like we should set the percentage of survivability of plantings. I think we've said like 90% in the past. So whatever that condition is.
And you just cut out with that number. What was it?
I think it's 90%, but just find whatever we said in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
That seems
Actually, I
high
have
too,
it
Seth.
saved.
All right, so we're getting the survivorship, sand nourishment. Good. And then I guess the condition read like if survivorship is below 90%, the applicant should come back in? Is that like,
Yeah. I'm looking super quick because I do have a list of wording that we've used in the past, and just to try to keep it somewhat consistent.
yes, I think that's helpful.
Sorry, this will take me about 10 seconds. I feel like I've said that a lot tonight.
No worries.
You guys who grew up on computers.
Oh, the computers are crushing me at this point between all day screen time and then like meetings. My
That's
eyes
it.
are fried.
Well, do you wear the blue glasses for your eyes?
Right here.
I still am wearing a mask in school, so like I can't do that.
Yeah, I know. It fogs up my glasses.
So the wording that I've found in the past, it didn't necessarily, I have seen percentages, but this is the one that I kind of liked. The applicant shall present a yearly report, including photographs demonstrating the condition and survivorship of the replanted area and the existing vegetated areas. Should the commission determine that additional plantings are necessary, they will be authorized based on this discussion. So kind of I feel like it's hard to get a real accurate percentage, but
Yeah.
looking at a site and saying, okay, everything's gone.
That's
This isn't,
fine.
you know,
Fine with me. Yeah, so that would take over 23 essentially.
yes, if everybody likes that.
I say go. Perfect.
Ooh,
There we go.
Mr. Computer over here.
I was going to say that was very quickly typed, Will.
That's because it's coming from my special list.
Cut and paste, quick, man,
He
boom.
knows his control commands.
And now you know why that
I love cut and paste.
Not in.
All
And
right,
just-
guys.
Hold on 1 second. Just Will, back to my. I don't know if we need to do it for this order, but maybe have a discussion with Jeff, because at one point we were being really good about putting the dates for those reports in. So I want to make sure that we have a standard protocol for those reports.
And I'll say that's really attractive to me going forward too, just for tracking purposes.
All right.
I do want to talk to Jeff.
Check on that then. All right, so would somebody then like to make,
If I may, you could add, if the applicant should present a yearly report from the date of these orders of conditions. If
Yeah.
you wanted to add that, if you wanted to be more specific,
Yeah.
it's
I
up
don't-
to you. I don't know if it's necessary.
I don't think so, but
yeah, I just worry like we're January right now. It might not be the
yeah.
most accurate
True.
representation.
Good point.
So yeah, let's leave that one open, and then we'll make sure going forward we're like consistent with that structure.
Yeah.
Or who's the one who's gonna have to check up on it most
Yeah.
likely.
That's right.
Okay,
So-
move to approve as amended.
Okay, motion made by Ian. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Mark got you, so I'm gonna give it to Mark. By roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Garrison, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously, and that should move us on to the Nantucket Land Trust, 3 Baltimore Street.
Where am I? There I am. All right. So the conditions that were added to this besides 1819, any plant material removed from the site is to be disposed of through the digester at the Nantucket landfill. I don't think they're going to be removing any plant material from the site. All brush hogging shall take place in the winter, and all trees to remain shall be flagged prior to brush hogging.
And well, can we add a condition that staff goes out and
Yeah.
checks the site before brush hogging? Just make sure like trees are marked appropriately and et cetera.
Yeah, well, you could take your dog out to mark the trees appropriately.
He's good at that.
You may prefer
Um,
pitch pines to Japanese.
I have a couple concerns about some of these conditions. On 21, I think winter is not very specific and doesn't necessarily need to be in the season that is winter on the calendar. Like it could be in the fall or the spring in March. So I would just say outside of the active growing season, and then also no work should take place between June 1st and July 31st.
Is that June 1st to July 31st? You said?
Of any given year.
Yes.
The northern long-eared bats have their pups, and their pups can't move when you're chopping down a tree.
The other comment I have, if I may, is this has come up for Japanese black pine work before. Depending on how they actually do the work here, it might not end up being important if they're just brush hogging small trees. But if there are any larger trees on the site and they have to like cut and chip them, then there's no need to put the wood chips through the digester. So we can just say removed. I think we've said in the past, disposed of through the digester at the Nantucket landfill or otherwise disposed of appropriately. There's a condition in there somewhere that we've done before.
Off-site.
Off-site.
A certain amount of good faith in that one, Seth.
I'll just say the conservation agent. All right.
Thank you, Will. Any other amendments, questions, comments to this one? And if not, would somebody feel comfortable making a motion to issue as amended?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion made by Linda. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously, and I believe that brings us to the end of our orders tonight. Or did we close this one?
Sheep
We did,
Pond?
yes.
No, we
Yeah.
didn't. Yep, didn't write it down because it was the last one. So 28 Sheep Pond.
And this was for the septic system that was exposed. I have conditions 18 and 19 on here. I'm not sure if there's other things that we'd like to see on this.
It's currently a pretty good hole in the bank, isn't it? When they remove that tank.
Yeah, I think we'd want to ensure like revegetation in these areas.
Yeah. And I'm not sure where the septic tank was might not exist anymore. I'm not sure.
Right.
Out to
But-
sea.
Yeah, or like hanging out of the bank. Yeah.
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 It's already been removed, you think, Will?
So the
Yeah.
this happened because the septic tank was exposed.
Well, I saw the picture of it exposed, but is it already gone?
I think they
Well,
have-
they showed a
already
picture of it,
removed
the hole where it was as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that part.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you
So
say
maybe-
any areas disturbed by installation or removal of the septic system shall be revegetated.
Yeah. If practicable.
If
Impractical, yeah. It may not exist anymore in another couple of months.
Right. As we're all aware.
So any areas disturbed by the removal will be revegetated.
As able, or however you want to say that.
I'm kind of concerned about like as able or if practicable, if the area doesn't exist anymore, then it doesn't need to be revegetated. It's
Well, that's
obvious.
what if practical means.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to add that because like if someone's like, hey, it's right on the top of the bank and it's going to erode in 6 months, why are we planting it? We'd still want them to plant it and secure up that bank. So if the land exists, they should be stabilizing it.
Sort of. As it floats away.
So could I put a period right here?
I guess.
I think so, yeah. Any other amendments, questions, comments? If not, would
Move
somebody
to
like
approve as amended.
Perfect. Is there a second? Seconded by Linda. So Steele,
Aye, sorry.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And I think that should be the end, hopefully, of our draft orders.
That is it.
All right. So that moves us on. We don't have any extensions of orders, so we'll move on to other business. First, we have the minutes from January 5th, 2023. Thank you, as always, Terry, for our minutes. Did anybody see anything in the January 5th minutes that needs amending? And if not, would somebody like to make a motion to approve as drafted?
So move. Second.
Joe got the motion, Linda the second. By roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And then we have the minutes from January 12th, 2023. Ian?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So in fact, 40 minutes into that meeting, Terry, I didn't actually say we still have the issue of deficit of 26,000 cubic yards. I said we still have the issue of the deficit of 60,000, 60,000 cubic yards. So please, if we, the amendment could reflect that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Any other amendments to the January 12th minutes? And if not, would somebody like to make a motion to issue as amended or accept as amended?
So moved.
Motion made by Linda, seconded by Joe. By roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And that moves us to enforcement actions, potential enforcement actions.
And I'm not sure
Down
if
that.
Paul's still on, right?
Paul is on. He just turned his camera back on.
Great. So we just have an update from 2 Gully Road.
Yeah, how about that?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Paul Santos from Nantucket Surveyors on behalf of the DiMartino family, the former owners of 2 Gully Road property. As you're aware, 2 Gully Road was issued 4 enforcement orders to 4 different parties. The DiMartino family is the party charged with providing the commission with a replication plan for the removal or cutting of the trees at the 2 Gully Road property. Since the initial enforcement orders were issued, essentially the project team was compiled to deal with moving this forward and developing a operation plan. So I'd like to just briefly kind of give you an update of who the players are and then where we're at.
Paul, can you hold on one second? Can everybody mute who's not speaking? We're picking up a lot of feedback. So again, if you're not Paul, you should mute, and I'm going to mute myself and be a good example too. And thank you, Paul.
Okay, thank you. So shortly after the enforcement orders were issued, the team charged with the restoration on behalf of the DiMartinos was compiled, and I'd like to just briefly go through who that team is, what's been done up to this date, and then in your packet tonight was a letter from Wilkinson Ecological Design that essentially set forth two requests. And I'd like to, in Seth's absence tonight, he couldn't be here, like to talk about those two requests and then move this forward to a date specific with regard to coming before the board again with a remediation plan. So the project team involves Rhoda Wyman is the local family attorney for the DiMartino family. We retained Glenn Wood from Rubin and Rudman to handle the legal aspects with regard to our filings before you. Seth Wilkinson from Wilkinson Ecological Design. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental has been retained to delineate the resource areas on the subject property. And Nantucket Surveyors is doing the survey component of the application. Once that team was put together, we have had constant correspondence with the Natural Resources staff, and I believe the staff has at least kept up the chair with regard to ongoing things that have been happening. We've had meetings with the Sconset Trust and the Nantucket Island Land Bank with specific requirements at the trust. Arthur Reed is their attorney, and Ben Shampoo has been involved also as he works for the trust with regard to landscape matters and other type of environmental issues. A site meeting was conducted yesterday with all the parties involved, Sconset Trust, Land Bank. Both Arthur and Ben were there. Rhoda was there, Seth, and then also Jeff and Will from Natural Resources staff. And that meeting occurred on site yesterday. So from that meeting, and actually prior to that, I make reference again to the Wilkinson letter that's submitted in your packet with two requests. One would be that we request that the hearing on this matter be continued till March 9th, which would give everyone involved, specifically mostly Seth, time to develop a complete plan for restoration. I think that request was met with positive feedback from Will and Jeff, and maybe even some discussions with the chair, kind of with the caveat that we come before you tonight, kind of give an update, and that on the 9th, all the parties that were issued the EO would have representative or be present at that March 9th meeting. The specific request that Seth set forth in his letter for work to occur between now and the 9th, and I'll read directly from Seth's letter. We would request that the Nantucket Conservation Commission amend the enforcement orders to allow Wilkinson Ecological Design to carefully remove the existing debris for the purpose of evaluating and inventorying the tree cutting activities. Removal methods would involve hand removal and winching of larger debris out of the resource area. Staging for the removal of the materials would be from existing developed portion of the landscape, driveways, and/or road shoulders. Based on the site visit yesterday, I think we all agreed that the corner of Gully Road as it heads into Codfish Park would be probably the best area to stage and do these activities. And in fact, there was one other player, Bartlett Tree Removal, I think, who Seth works with on island here, would have involvement in that component of the work that we're now requesting. The majority, for those of you who haven't been to the site, I'm assuming most of you have been out there, but the majority of the trees that were cut are obviously still left in place. It's predominantly Japanese black pine, which is essentially an invasive and prohibited tree in Massachusetts now, but those were, it looks like there had been some historic cutting and some new cutting. The intent here is to go in clean that area, get the fallen trees out. And Will, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's not in the letter here, but Seth actually had asked about potentially maybe lowering some of the stumps. So the ease would be to get to winch out some of the material would help within that request also. So that's basically where we're at. The two requests, the March 9th, and then the request to at least start some of the process, which would give Seth's team a better idea of how to evaluate and then proceed forward with what their plan is for the property. Happy to answer any questions that the commission may have specific to at least what we're asking for tonight. And understanding that March 9th obviously would be, I think, a more detailed hearing, and then maybe more questions could be asked at that point. But happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Paul. Linda, I see your hand went up.
Yeah, I brought this up at the last meeting and I didn't get an answer because we couldn't do it at that meeting. I know the DiMartinos got cited, the land bank got cited. Who else got cited?
Sconset Trust and
Trust and
the work.
Yeah, who did the work? I never saw that on the thing I signed. Who did the work?
Paul, would you like to disclose?
Well, I mean, his name is on the enforcement order. I'm not sure whether
I
it's
only see the
appropriate for me to
signature page.
say it. So.
Well, I signed it. I want to know who I signed.
I'm not.
The enforcement order was the 4 enforcement orders. One was to the DiMartinos, Sconset Trust, Nantucket Island Land, and the landscaper's name, Robert Slade.
Robert Slade. Okay. Got it.
Linda, do you have any follow-ups?
No, but I understand it now. Okay.
Okay. Seth, I saw your hand go up, and then Joe, I saw you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in favor of allowing the two requests to move forward, to have the more substantive hearing on March 9th, and to allow for the initial removal of trees to allow what we'll consider ecological design, better lay of the landscape to plan a restoration. I will just ask the staff, I know the enforcement orders have been sent out. Have the fines been issued as well? And if so, if not, then we should issue those, albeit however small they are, we should still issue them.
That is so annoying.
Yes, it is. But I agree with you, Seth, on all of that. Joe, your hand had been up. Oh, you're muted.
A question for Paul, and that is, what will we learn when you get all done with this? What will be the bottom line that'll trigger a solution to the problem?
Okay, so the intent would be on March 9th, there would be a full restoration plan proposed. Seth did go into some of it, what his initial thoughts were yesterday. Obviously, anything that gets done, Sconset Trust and the Land Bank need to be in cooperation with. I think everyone from the team that we have prepared is all kind of in cooperation. The idea would be to remove the trees that have fallen, better assess what is out there with regard to saplings, any type of other vegetation, and then come in with a plan for restoration. I don't believe the restoration obviously is going to involve the replacement of black pines, but some of the Japanese black pines that are there as saplings would work as, would be left in place. They would protect any type of plantings that Seth's team thought would be appropriate. They would act as kind of a buffer, if you will, to help whatever's put in there thrive. Obviously, it's essentially an area that's dune. It's subject to wind, and the replacement of the black pines is not what anybody wants to do or they can do. So But you'll have a full plan with Seth in attendance to describe that on the 9th, Joe. That's really what we're looking to come back with.
I walked on that property a few weeks ago. It's all sand. How is some of that stuff going to be planted in there and grow?
Well, I think Seth's team has had some success on similar projects, and Seth's pretty confident on what he comes up with. They'll be able to potentially thrive and be monitored in that area. So oddly enough, I think, this is probably a project that could be permissible as an invasive removal. But Seth seemed comfortable with, coming up with a plan for something down in that area that can work.
At the same height?
So I think
that's going to be my question. That's going to be my question. Just be prepared for that one. I want them back to the same height.
So guys, I think Seth will be prepared for all that information. But we also have to realize that like sometimes trees can't go in at the exact same height because their survivability will be like a 0. So I think we again need to wait for Seth to propose his plan and then ask those questions, but understand the reality of establishing tree roots in a dune field and letting them kind of grow into that space might be the only realistic way for them to survive.
So
Yeah,
I
so they
had
got
my
what they
hand
want.
up.
And Ian, go ahead.
Thank you. So Paul, they didn't fall, they were cut illegally. And I would like my fellow commissioners to agree with me that we ask town council if we can press criminal charges against the people that did this damage. So, I mean, it's malicious damage at a level that I don't think we've ever experienced. And I happen to agree with Linda that I feel that whatever it takes to put mature trees in there, survivability, that Wilkinson should actually have a plan for mature trees being put in. And if it costs $1 million to do it, so be it. So that is just the tip of the iceberg of my thoughts on this issue.
Same here.
All right, so maybe we can also suggest to staff to submit some documents about growing trees in an environment like this. I think it would be maybe helpful just to understand the survivability there. Seth, I saw your hand go up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for trying to constrain this discussion to March 9th, because I think we need a plan to review. But I would say, not that I advocate for doing this or not, there is a pathway within the Wetland Protection Act to pursue criminal charges for enforcement. It is exceedingly rare, but that pathway does exist. I don't advocate for doing that, but that pathway it has been done in other locations. And I think we do need to temper our expectations about the height of trees. Japanese black pines were brought to the island specifically to fill a niche to stabilize sand and to provide a windbreak. And although they do that extremely effectively in sandy soils, they are an invasive plant. They were added to the Massachusetts prohibited plant list, and there's going to be no opportunity for the applicant to propose that same tree. And you'd be hard pressed to find other trees that are going to survive in that area at that height. But we'll see what, Wilkinson has to say.
Thank you, Seth. Any other questions or comments, Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Seth, for your measured analysis. And so to build on top of your measured analysis, I would like to make a motion that we approach town council to see if criminal charges can be pressed against those that were responsible directly and indirectly for this episode, this incident.
Okay. So Ian has made a motion. Is there a second? Don't see a second.
Hold on, I'll second that. I didn't realize I was still muted.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Linda. So by roll vote, Beal,
I wouldn't object to looking into it. I'm not sure I'm in favor of it, so I'll vote aye with a caveat.
okay. Engelborg.
Opposed.
So I'm also opposed. However, I'd be willing to like ask questions of town council if we could get at them. Golding,
Well, I proposed it, so I want to talk to town council.
all right. Plantowski,
No,
Williams,
I'm in favor to hear what he has to say, what town council would have to say about that.
okay. So we're at a split vote on this one.
Well, let me propose an amendment to that, my proposal,
Okay,
that we consult with town council as to what the ramifications might be that the Conservation Commission might have at its disposal to deal with this incident.
And I'll
okay,
amend my second also.
okay. So by roll vote, Beal,
That was my first aye vote, so I vote aye again.
okay, Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
for consultation, aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, so that carries unanimously. Hopefully we can get it through like the gauntlet of town approval to reach town council with that question. Arthur Reed,
Thank you very much. As you know, I represent the Sconset Trust, which is completely innocent of any wrongdoing in this situation. We bought the property after the work had been done, unaware of the fact that the work had been done. And I would make the obvious point that I would certainly hope that there would be no thought of there being any civil or criminal penalties assessed against either the Sconset Trust or the Land Bank, who are both innocent parties in this situation. I think that obviously, we're very happy, we're very pleased that the responsible parties in this, the DiMartinos, have engaged an appropriate team. We strongly endorse the fact that they have engaged Wilkinson as well as Glenn Wood and Paul Santos as their principal advisors in this situation, all of whom I have very high regard for in terms of their integrity, and it gives us great confidence that the work will be undertaken in an appropriate way. And in that regard, obviously, as the property owner, the Sconset Trust would presumably be signing the notice of intent with the understanding that all of the work is going to be done by and at the expense of the DiMartinos, who have confirmed to us that that is their plan and that that is going to continue to be the case. We're obviously going to be wanting to review the submission carefully and comment on it, and want to make sure that the work is done in a way that will resolve the problem on a permanent basis, since we will wind up owning the property in perpetuity. So I would again actually want to endorse some of the comments that Commissioner Engelberg particularly has made on this point. I think it's obvious that the type of plantings that will be able to take hold and survive in this location may not involve mature trees, and it might very well be a complete waste of time and effort to attempt to put large mature trees in place, as opposed to vegetation that will have a long-term chance of success. Again, I'm not saying that from any standpoint other than that we want the project to wind up being done in the right way and the best way for the long-term environmental concerns affecting the property and the area generally. Thanks.
thank you, Arthur.
Madam Chair, could I just jump in after Arthur's comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Good evening again. Glenn Wood. I represent, or our firm represents, both the property owner as well as the landscaper involved here. our team has been given a full green light to do the right job here. Obviously, we hear Linda and Ian's comments as well as the other ones, and we'll take those back to Seth. His company had an annual meeting today and tonight, so that he was unavailable, unfortunately. But we've jumped in, and I've had, and our team has had active and ongoing conversations with both Arthur and Ben, as well as the land bank staff, and as well as with Will and Jeff. And I'm entirely confident that our team is going to come in with a very strong application, addressing, the concerns to the greatest extent possible. So I'm looking forward to be part of that team and doing a strong job for what obviously has taken place here. I don't intend to comment otherwise on the other comments about criminal or civil enforcement. I think that's beyond tonight's discussion. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mark?
I'm not sure what the land bank's role is in this project. I didn't know they were.
They got some of the property that was cut was land bank property as well.
It appears, if I could answer that, Madam Chair, it appears that it's a very small amount of the footprint. It may only be even 2 Japanese pines. So the vast majority of the footprint of the work is on the trust property. But as part of our plan, we're hoping to have this generated by sometime in the next month, and plan to be submitting that in draft form to the involved parties, the trust, the land bank staff, Will and Jeff, to get their input and guidance on it as well. So we're really hoping that when we come in March, we're going to come in with a very strong plan that's been peer reviewed by all the involved players up front. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm curious, commissioners, just in dealing with our earlier enforcement issues, I think we should probably make a motion to allow them to remove the debris before our next hearing, just so that we've clearly made that decision in our record before we continue. Mark?
Yeah, I support that idea, Ashley, and I'd be happy to make the motion momentarily. But I wanted to ask Will or some other forestry expert about lowering of stumps. What's the thought on that?
I think that the flushing of the stumps to the level of the grade is really the best way to go about this, for multiple reasons. One, removing all the brush. If they're using winch lines and whatnot, it's going to be next to impossible. But for the restoration of the site, they're not going to want 3-foot stumps dotting the entire landscape, and neither are we.
Mark, go ahead.
Well, can I make that motion now, Ashley? Does that help you?
Yes, you can make that.
I will make the motion to allow them to permit the removal and to encourage them to remove the stumps to at grade.
All right. Motion made by Mark. Joe, were you seconding that motion? You're muted.
I'll second if he doesn't.
I was.
Okay, so Joe was given the second. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Landowski,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously, allowing for that debris removal. And if there's no other questions, comments, discussion, we'll see you guys back on March 9th.
I do have one
Thank
more
you.
question, Madam Chair, through you.
Yep, go ahead, Linda.
If they're going to remove the debris, and that's all the junk that they just cut down and left there, and they're going to take the stumps down to grade, that's like 100 stumps. How are they going to plant when they leave the stumps there?
So we will leave that up to Seth. He is like very good at presenting his ecological restorations, and I am confident he will have a plan for all of that.
Okay, because that's another question you better be prepared for, because you can't plant on top of 100 stumps.
Yes, we also don't want to remove all the root systems and just completely destabilize. So again, I think we should trust the process that Seth needs this time to develop his plan, get in there once the debris is removed. And then these are great questions for the March 9th conversation. Yeah. All right. So if there's nothing further, we will see you guys all back on March 9th.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. And good luck to the people who are doing that debris removal, because it's
dangerous.
Like little landmines all in there. So
yeah.
All right. So we're still on enforcement actions, potential enforcement actions. RJ Turcotte, your hand had gone up at the beginning of this. Did you have an enforcement question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually, I almost forgot to make my bi-weekly now public comment to request that the commission and staff put the Nantucket Island Resort stormwater issue on the agenda, one of the upcoming agendas. It is officially raining outside hard enough that if those systems aren't operating properly, we have untreated stormwater going into the harbor. So I'm just going to be the squeaky wheel. Thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you, RJ. And I know because we're under enforcement actions, I'm going to make this comment now. I do think we need to tighten the ship with enforcements and probably schedule a special meeting in addition to our regulatory meetings, just to like get us all caught up initially before we start putting this on a regular meeting. But before the Meter Street issue came up, I was questioning what's going on at 119 Baxter, because that's a very old ongoing enforcement. And Hollywood Farms, because they're grazing sheep back out there in the buffer zone again and have never like come before us. So I just want to make sure we're keeping track.
I think we're losing the battle on Hollywood Farms.
It's hard. I mean, that was going through, like, there were personal issues happening, but I know the land bank's a little involved next door. So someone's got to take ownership. So, all right. So that'll move us on to reports. We have crack.
Nothing to report at this juncture.
All right. CPC.
We had our monthly meeting and gave away a lot of money or reimbursed a lot of money. Lead item was Sanctity Light, which is a lot of money, and they did a good job.
Very good. We're lucky to have the CPC and all those funds going out to deserving organizations and projects. NP and EDC?
No update.
Okay. So that moves us on to commissioner comments.
I've got two.
Yep.
Wonderful meeting again, Madam Chair. Can somebody remind me, because I just told one of my landscapers they're not using it. They gave me a plan that had it in there. The Japanese black pine was just added to the list, correct?
Yes.
The
Seth would be the expert to speak on this, but.
And the weeping lovegrass was also added?
Yes.
And
Scotch broom.
And Scotch broom.
Scotch broom. The Scotch broom one sort of surprised me, but it's everywhere.
Yes.
I
will say that the list that you're talking about is the Massachusetts prohibited plant list.
Yeah.
Which bans the sale, transport, importation, and use, I think, of these plants. However, those 3 plants did get added just like last week, although there is a phase out period, and each of the phase out periods is different for each of the 3 plants. The phase out period is to allow existing nurseries to clear their stock. If you have landscapers that you're in constant communication with, I would highly recommend them to not use those plants during the phase out period. But technically, if they find an existing stock, they could still use it until the phase out period has completed.
Well, the amount of that weeping lovegrass he had on the plan would have filled my 2 acres of property. And I said, nope, I said, we're not using that, and we're not using Scotch Brome, but the weeping love grass is something I'm gonna have to wean them off of. But he had so much new weeping love grass on a new construction site. I said, it's not happening.
I'm glad you did, Linda. That's good.
That stuff is annoying, especially when you cut it in the winter. It looks like crap.
And we have native grasses that just serve so much better purposes for us.
Yeah,
Joe,
I told him that. Yeah.
Joe, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, that issue we just talked about on the plants that are invasive. I was really surprised when I saw that saying they gave the nurseries X number of days or months to get rid of everything they had, which means they're going to plant it everywhere. Somebody's
Yeah.
going to plant it. Doesn't seem to make much sense.
Not necessarily. The nurseries don't always sell out of that stuff, and you have to you can't have someone stuck with stock. I think you end up in a little bit of a dicey area. It's like our regulation. We have to have a time period before they're enacted. This allows that kind of time period. Again, Seth is better to speak to this than me.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I will say thank you to the Conservation Commission, because if you remember, we actually wrote a letter of support to MDR to request that they list these species. So our efforts actually helped with this process. So thank you again to the Concom for writing that letter. The phase out period it's a little bit unfortunate because you hear the big news, but then you realize, oh, there's actually years left for some of these species. However, it is standard practice. Every time species have been added to the list, there's typically been a phase out period to allow for the reality of the horticultural industry. I would also say MDAR, who is responsible for this, the regulatory agency responsible for the prohibited plant list, is the Massachusetts Division of Agricultural Resources. So they have a responsibility to, deal not only with protecting native landscapes, but to deal with agriculture as well. So that is part of the reason for phasing periods.
Is there any way we can get rid of privet?
If I may continue to comment, Madam Chair. So the MDAR is the agency who actually creates the prohibited plant list. But before it gets to MDAR, there's another agency, MIPAG, the Massachusetts Invasive Plant Advisory Group. And the MIPAG evaluates species for their potential invasiveness. So how this process worked is two people from Nantucket, actually, Sarah Boyce and Kelly Omand, documented these 3 species and submitted them to MIPAG for review. Then MIPAG voted at their committee meeting to declare these invasive, and then they sent their recommendation to MDAR, who several months later accepted the recommendation and allowed it to go onto the prohibited plant list. MIPAG has said that they'll accept recommendations from any responsible party, as long as there is the appropriate documentation of the species invasiveness. There was a specific discussion about privet. So only one species of privet is currently on the prohibited plant list. It's Ligustrum obtusifolium, which is maybe called border privet, or I can't remember the common name. But there's like 10 species of privet that exist in the horticultural trade, and at least 3 or 4 that are commonly used on Nantucket. The problem with privet is that identifying privets down to a species level, so beyond the genus level down to a species level, requires very specific botanical expertise. And so we need people who have the expertise to actually document the species and report those species to MIPAG. And if they do that, then MIPAG will take them up. But unfortunately, right now, we just currently don't have enough data. However, MyPAG at the discussion when privet was brought up did have a discussion about how it may be time to reconsider some of their listing characteristics, particularly in the light of climate change, and just updated app-based species tracking and things like that. So there's a potential that entire genera may be able to be submitted to MyPAG for invasiveness criteria listing in the future. But right now, we really need to submit individual species, which would require more documentation. I would love to see that documentation. And I know other people would as well, but we don't currently have the appropriate data. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. And really, I think to deter people from using those problematic species, continue to reference the native plant guide on Nantucket. I mean, those are the plants that aren't going to spread invasively, obviously, because they're native. They're more likely to survive in times of climate change. They're adapted to our climate, our soils, etc. So pushing those natives is always the way to go. Ian, did you have a comment?
Well, only that Mark and I are old enough to remember that back in the early 60s in Sconset, there was a single property that had a privet hedge, one alone. So just making that point.
I feel like I could say that about Leland cypress, and now that's stuff's everywhere. So yeah, there we go. Any other commissioners' comments? Not, we'll give it over to Will for administrator staff reports.
I have a 20-page document to read. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have anything tonight. Other than that, I also really dislike privet and Leland cypress.
And maybe, Will, in the interim between our next meeting, we can get an email circulating about the next date for our regs update discussion, and potentially like an enforcement strategy discussion. I don't know what we would call it, but something along those lines as well.
I think a special meeting for enforcements, and I think where we're at, anything that's come up in the last 4 months or so is being tracked extremely well. And I think we can do some work to track down some of the older stuff. And I do want to say, I think we're in a good place internally going forward with our tracking and whatnot, but I think improving it so that maybe there's some public facing version of that, or, at least we can share it with the commission, just so that we're all on the same page. I think that'd be great.
Oh, and
yes,
if I
Ian.
may, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want, we've voted 7-0, excuse me, to consult town council on what our options are concerning this issue, this unfortunate issue. So I don't want that to disappear in the ether. I'd like us to get a reply before the meeting on March 9th. Is that something that you could push for?
I think I can, between Jeff and I, we can do our absolute best.
Thank you.
And I just had a thought, Terry, because I saw your hand. Your last meeting with us?
Well, that was going to be my staff report. Yes.
Oh.
What?
This is my last meeting with Concom.
Worst news of the night.
No.
Thank you, Terry, for all your hard work and service over the many.
You're welcome. And while I'm being a lady of leisure, I shall think of you briefly.
You can watch this.
Oh, yes, I can always watch. I know where to find you.
Well, Clary, thank you so much for all your work. I mean, for me, it's been 10 years. I mean,
yeah, you and I, we've been doing this together. Yeah, it's like next Tuesday is my last HDC after over 15 years.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
I'm really looking forward to saying,
You're gonna have
that one. I'm going to have all of this evening time. I'm not going to know what to do with.
Well, if we were meeting in person and I'd known about this, I would have bought a bottle of champagne for you. So
We'll have to gather you together for something and celebrate you, Terry, because we're so lucky to have you all of these years.
Do we have a
Ellen?
replacement, Terry?
Nope.
Oh, that's just great.
It's up to the individual departments.
Well, you can
I
imagine how
don't
the
know.
HDC
I
is
have
gonna
no
do that.
idea. Yeah, I have no idea if the town is planning to hire someone in time, or I haven't heard anything. So I'm just going
Well,
on
they
the
better.
assumption that I'm shoving it all back to the departments. And
Oh,
if they
God.
hire someone, then they can shove it all back to the new person.
Should I start crying now?
Start crying. I'm
I will
crying
let
at the
you.
HCC.
I'm looking pretty hard at Will right now.
Oh, God.
The reality.
Maybe, yeah. Give Lisa the sort of evil eye.
Oh my God. I can't imagine the HDC without it. Oh my God.
Morgan.
Well, I think everybody's very happy for you, and thank you for everything, Terry.
Well, sometimes it's been a pleasure.
Well, from
Ay, ay, ay.
my end, it's always been a pleasure to work with you. I know that might not be the other way around all the time.
Well, I was really glad when my last SBPF meeting was over. I was really happy about that.
Yeah, well,
some things
You
I
were
just
alone.
really glad I will never, ever, 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 ever see again.
uh-huh.
Well, Terry, we're just so beyond lucky to have had you for so long, and I just hope that you have the best time in retirement and don't think about this stuff at all.
Always come back.
Yeah, I fully plan not to think about it. Like I said, I'll find something to do with my evenings.
We can recommend some Netflix series.
Exactly.
Oh, that's pretty cute,
Netflix.
RJ. I
Yeah.
saw that.
All right, guys. Well, with our celebration of Terry again, like round of applause, Terry. We're just so lucky, so lucky. But with that, I think we will call it a meeting. Does somebody want to make a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Joe,
Second.
seconded by Linda, by roll vote Beal,
Goodbye, Terry. Aye.
Engelborg,
Hi.
Garrisman, I, Golding,
Goodbye, Terry. Aye.
Landowski. Oh, you're muted.
Aye.
Williams.
Unfortunately, I for Terry.
All right, that carries unanimously, and this adjourns Terry's last Concom meeting as the minutes taker. We will miss you.
We will. Bye-bye, Terry.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Everybody.
Bye, Terry.
Oh, boy.